saving system settings and game progress on the memory card.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Saving Progress, where we hope to learn a little bit more about our personal history with video games. I am your host, Addy, and with me today I have a guest that isn't afraid to stand out a little bit. He invests a lot of his time into being a drummer for various musical projects, as well as getting his gains on at the local gym when he's not working there, with two activities that can only be described as exhausting. His favorite way to cool off is kicking his feet up and playing some video games, and even live streaming them on Twitch here and there. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Legend Penguin himself, my good friend Aaron. What's going on, man? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. How about yourself? How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good, actually. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because the weather's a little better, but I'm good to go.
It's slowly getting better. It's been brutal lately. It's getting a lot better.
I'm much more of like I don't like when it's too hot. I prefer like spring and fall over summer, definitely. But
I definitely don't like 30 degrees and terrible.
Yeah, now that winter's on its way out, I think that's where I'm coming from. But yeah, I had dinner a couple hours ago. That's out of the way. I've got my water here, so getting to record this episode, actually. I mean, it's been a long time coming, and I can only assume that you're excited as I am to get started.
I really am. Like, honestly, I know we've talked about this before, but like I've listened to the other episodes of Saving Progress, and they're a lot of fun. I've been excited to go on it ever since I saw you bringing people onto it, so I'm stoked for it.
Fantastic. And I know your history with video games, so I feel like this conversation is gonna flow pretty well. So
yeah, I can talk all day about video games, so I'm really excited for it.
Well, that's why you're here, man. Well, Aaron, the first thing that I'd like to do here is ask you this question that I ask every guest on the show, just so you can help us understand everything you encapsulate, so to speak. Who is Aaron? What can you tell us? Obviously, we touched on a number of things in the intro, but help us paint a picture as to who you are.
I mean, you covered a lot of it in the beginning of that. Basically, I am a drummer. I've been a musician my whole life. Various instruments, but drumming is my main focus. That's the one I'm most proud of, at least. I do drum in a couple different projects. 14 Yellow is one of my main metal groups. Me and Tyler Marcellini do Loopzilla. Also, I work with Liz Scott. I do basically her live drums for some local stuff, and it's a good time. Outside of music, I am a fitness enthusiast. I like to go to the gym. I do work at a gym as well, so it helps out. The commute from work to the gym is pretty short because I work there.
Yeah, honestly.
But beyond that, so that's something that takes up a lot of my free time. I love every second of that. And when I'm home, I play a lot of video games. I've been playing video games for as long as I can remember, honestly. My dad was big into them, in the late 80s and 90s. Growing up, we had a PlayStation 2 a couple years after it released. And, ever since then, I've always been, especially gravitating towards Sony titles. But I've been playing video games for, really as long as I can consciously remember.
And I mean, honestly, that's a pretty good trait to have for being on the show here. So, well, for now, let's touch back on that gym aspect. You're a manager at the gym you work at, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm an assistant manager there.
Are you, so, I mean, obviously you're sweating while you're over there. Do you consider that more of a workout than drumming is? Because, I mean, I've seen you on stage, and you go absolutely nuts,
yeah,
to say the least.
I'm not sure which is harder. They're both very physical. I mean, the live performances are very aggressive from my end of things.
Yeah.
It's an emotional thing for me. It's very passionate. I love to express myself on stage. And it's just something that kind of comes out as you've seen, it's a lot of aggression.
Yeah.
Breaking sticks and throwing stuff around. And
yeah, I forgot about that part. You definitely do that.
It's a good time, and it's funny with the dynamic that we have in my band. I love driving that energy from the back. I feel like a lot of drummers are very stationary, and I really gravitate towards guys who have that stage presence from behind the kit, which is so hard to do for a lot of people.
And it's interesting in a way. I mean, you're almost the frontman in the groups that you do, just because you have this crazy amount of energy on stage. Like
in a way,
you're dishing out the titles of the songs, and you're making a name for yourself out there.
I'm certainly trying to. Lord knows that I'm trying. It's a lot of fun, and for the groups that I play in, it's really just me and a bunch of my friends. Like my main project, 14 Yellow. I mean, I've been playing music with Tyler and Connor for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
So the chemistry is really always there, and it makes translating that into a musical side of things really easy because we all know who we are.
Well, one thing's definitely for sure about both working out and being a musician. It's definitely hard work, and it takes a lot of dedication to be successful with it. So ultimately, I'm just glad that you're able to find a place for yourself in this whole mess here that we call life. So
yeah, it's you got to crop that out. It's kind of difficult to do that. So I'm glad that happened to me kind of on accident.
Well, I mean, you got the passion, so whether it's an accident or not, at least you're in it. But
I'm glad I'm here.
Now, as we know, getting swole is the goal. But when you're at home, sometimes you're streaming on Twitch under what username?
Yeah, I stream sometimes on Twitch. I would go under Legend Penguin 23.
Legend Penguin 23, that's right.
That's my tag for basically everything. Yeah, I just like to stream some games occasionally. I'm trying to get back into it more consistently this year. So I've always have a lot of fun streaming, even if it's just to, a couple of my friends or my brothers are watching.
Gotcha.
Something short. I stream a lot of different stuff. Recently, I was streaming LA Noire. I've done like Wreckfest or NHL.
What kind of games do you normally play on there? Like, is it like mostly like a single player kind of thing, or multiplayer, or like a little bit of both?
It's almost always single player.
Okay.
I kind of like to just do it, solo and work from there. I have done some multiplayer streams of like Rocket League, Warzone at times. Back whenever Warzone was a lot bigger and I was a little more into Call of Duty. I'm not so much now.
Yeah.
But whenever that was a lot bigger and my friends were more active on it, we were streaming a lot of Warzone. Lately, it's been a lot of single player, just because I kind of like to just play story games. Like that, I really enjoy like playing through a good single player story. I know it's kind of like the anti, where the market for video games are going currently. They're moving sort of away from single player experiences, but
at least like Twitch streaming, because like there's definitely a huge element when it comes to like just like someone being really good at like Overwatch or something, like you want to see them do that, or like Apex or Fortnite or whatever. So
oh yeah, people want to see that competitiveness, and and it's always exciting. I mean, like Call of Duty has a league, and there's the Rocket League tournaments are massive, Apex Legends, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for myself and the streamers that I like to watch, like I really enjoy doing single player stuff because it gives you a chance to just like go through a story on your own and have some like engagement with the people who are in your chat too.
And I know for a fact that you do every once in a while you're streaming with Nomo Arigato from the first episode of the podcast, if you guys remember.
Yeah, me and him, we used to stream a lot, and it's been a little bit sporadic lately. But I was on his stream for a very long time consistently, especially during all the lockdown with everything when none of us were going anywhere, so we were just playing a bunch of video games. I'm proud to be a part of the dojo. One of the founding members. But yeah, no, shout out to Nomo. Like we have a ton of fun playing video games together. We played Rocket League together. We've played Warzone. We've played Far Cry together. We played all kinds of stuff. And it's a blast, especially like jumping on with him.
Yeah,
and he's got a big community. And it's full of really great people, and they're all super cool.
Well, you're definitely keeping busy, that's for sure. But I'll be sure to leave a link to all of your projects in the description here, along with your Twitch channel, of course, and the various different musical projects that you mentioned, 14 Yellow, Loop Solo, of course. That will be down there for you guys to check out and subscribe to. So, yeah, I mean, I hope you've taken the time to think about a few games that have really come to inspire you over your lifetime, Aaron. Ideally, these are games that you've chosen because they've left a lasting impression. They're ones that have the privilege of being called your favorites. So to keep things simple, we've narrowed it down to 3 games, but no sense in not going the extra mile if the conversation deems it necessary. So, my man, you ready to get started?
I'm ready, man. Let's go.
I thought so. Well, let's go ahead and get started on the Dark Souls of video games. Dark Souls.
A good place to start.
A little bit of backstory, at least coming from myself here. Obviously, you're the resident Dark Souls expert, but I played a little bit of Dark Souls 3 and a little bit of Bloodborne as well. And for what it's worth, I don't know if I was in the wrong mood or just the learning curve was a little too punishing at the time. I'm not disinterested in the series. But it like for whatever reason, I never like bothered going back to them, so like I like the games and I like the concepts, especially the, sort of like the art direction and everything that's like come out of the series. I think it's all really cool. And the memes on top of it, of course, it's,
all the can't forget the memes,
of course. So, like I understand how influential it is to gaming in general, but what can you tell us? Like, obviously, the name gets tossed around a lot, but what actually is Dark Souls? Like, can you introduce it to us?
Yeah, it's one of those things that a lot of people are kind of culturally aware of because it gets thrown around. A game is difficult. It's the Dark Souls of whatever genre it's made in.
Of course, yeah.
But my experience with it started with Dark Souls 3. Basically, when I got my PS4, I want to say this was 2015 or 16, and Dark Souls was the first game that I purchased for it. I got Infamous. I got a couple other games with it that I wasn't super crazy about. I went to a friend's house. He had Dark Souls 3, and I played it for maybe 20, 30 minutes, and I really, really liked the challenge and like the art style. It was like such a beautiful looking game, and it's so daunting. All the enemies are big. All the weapons are big. The soundtrack is beautiful, and
the soundtrack is big.
The soundtrack is very big.
Really good way to put it, actually.
That's really the best word for it. And I just kind of really fell in love with the game. It was such a challenge to start. That first boss in Dark Souls 3, his name's Gundyr. It's such a test for the entire game. It kind of teaches you about learning move patterns and all the things that are going to be important throughout the entire game all come up in that fight. Everything from boss phases to, learning move sets to just like, I call it giant theory, where it's like just getting underneath a guy and trying to stay underneath him or trying to get space. It really teaches you everything about the combat in that first hour of the game.
And it's kind of crazy. Yeah, like going into it, I would have never expected that like this happened so early in the game. Just because like, of course, like natural gaming conventions, like you're taught to just like get through whatever dungeon or whatever the hell, and then you get to the final boss. But it was like, they're throwing a pretty challenging boss at you right at the beginning, so like it's definitely a great way to teach. Well, maybe not teach, but it's definitely a way to like force you to teach yourself the mechanics of the game.
And I think teach is definitely the right word for it, because there's a lot
you think so?
I would definitely say so. I think there's a lot of learning you have to do in those games to succeed. Obviously, for example, in that first area, you start off in what's called the Cemetery of Ash, and there's a couple of little things to tell you, like your controls. Hey, left stick for move, right stick for camera. R1 for light attack, R2 for heavy attack, and things like that.
Yeah. Now that you mention, yeah, I think I do vaguely remember that.
Yeah, it introduces a couple of different enemies to you. There's a guy who has no shield and just a sword, a guy who has a sword and shield, someone who has a crossbow, and then it mixes them up together a little bit. It puts a crossbow and a swordsman together. It puts a shield, a guy with a shield and a crossbow together. And it puts a couple different things, some traps together even. So if you go to a corner, there's a guy you don't see. Well, that's something you're going to have to learn, because Dark Souls is all about making sure you know what's going on around you and not just like flying through the place.
Huh.
And it really teaches you like everything about all the conventions of the game moving forward. Obviously it gets way harder and it gets way more complex and a lot faster, but all those most important lessons you have to learn to like get the core conventions of the game are really taught in that first hour.
And I think it's kind of interesting that like you credit Dark Souls 3 as your first like venture into the series. Like I feel like a lot of people would say like they started maybe on like Bloodborne or even back on like PS3, like maybe they even started with Demon Souls or something like that. But I think it's interesting that like you have like what is considered the third entry in the series, like your first real introduction. Like was that just like a product of its time, or it's just happened to be like the thing that was available to you?
I think it was just a product of availability for me.
Okay.
I wasn't really aware of Demon Souls, to be completely honest, whenever it first came out. Dark Souls 1 and 2 were games that I heard of and never really knew much about. Obviously, like, the memes and stuff you see and whatnot, and hearing like Get Good and all that different stuff, and the whole "you died" meme is like just the most, for lack of a better phrase, like it's an eternal meme. Like, it's never gonna go away. It's always gonna be funny.
Yeah, honestly, I could see it sticking around for a while, especially with just like the impact the series has had. Like, effectively, almost like it's become a genre in its own sense. Really,
it really has. It's kind of cropped out its own little like niche for itself. And I think for me, getting into 3, to answer your original question, was just the fact that like it was a game that I tried, I really liked, and I just wanted to keep playing. It wasn't really like me kind of starting with anything or had any reason to start with the third one. It was just a matter of, I'm like, oh, this game looks nice, I want to try it. And then as I got into it and got much more into it, I realized how much of this world there was that Miyazaki has built.
Yeah, so then at that point, what games came after that for you then? Like, did you jump into like 2 after that, or like where did that go for you?
Yeah, I kind of went backwards. I got through 3, my first time through it, and I was so engrossed in the world, I wanted to learn a lot more about it. So I started watching, and again, we're going to cover this a little bit more in depth here, but there's so much lore. There is just so much lore in this game. Just how the world is built and what the characters mean and what they represent and what they're there for. All those things. There is just so much engrossing content. And I was compelled to kind of work my way back through the series. So after Dark Souls 3, I'd heard a lot about Bloodborne, and I bought Bloodborne, and that game is phenomenal. That Bloodborne is also a phenomenal game. There are literally no weak games. Like, a bad Dark Souls game is a very good game nonetheless, I would say.
Yeah, and a lot of people credit like Bloodborne just being like one of the, for lack of a better term, like the most game possible, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it very much,
I get
like
that.
And especially like just in the Dark Souls series in general, like it plays a lot of the show don't tell aspect, especially when it comes to the plot, because you're talking earlier about like the game quite literally introducing you to its mechanics like through like one like really difficult boss first thing in the beginning, and then later on you're being thrust into this world that you have very little understanding of, especially if you didn't like look anything up about it leading up to it. So it's like, what do you know about this world beyond just the things that are around you? And
you really go in super blind, and that's one of the kind of beauties of these games. I think it makes them so special because your character's so not special.
That is true. Yeah, you're just any other guy, really.
Yeah, I mean, in Dark Souls 3, like, they just call you Ashen One. You're just you're just Ashen. You're not even fit to be Cinder, they say. And so you're just kind of like a husk. You're just a hollow, and you kind of just get thrust into this world because you're a chosen undead, and you kind of just go through the world as if you had just woken up in a foreign place, kind of the same way you go through the game, and not knowing where things are and not knowing how to navigate through the world. It's a lot of contextual storytelling that just like the game tells you so much by telling you nothing at all.
Yes. Yeah, that is definitely a case. And then, I mean, in that instance, you could also say like you'll finish the entire game and you'll still have questions about whatever it is that you encountered or may not have even encountered. Like nowadays, like people are going online to like Reddit and things like that where they're talking about their experiences. Like someone else might have started talking about something that you had no idea even existed, because as far as I'm concerned, the worlds within those games are just so vast, and like you would really have to try in order to experience everything within the game. But chances are you're gonna run into something that leaves a profound impact on you.
And I think for me, when I first went through the game, I went through very blind. I didn't really know much about it. I played the first hour already, so the first hour kind of went by with a breeze. But everything else after was all brand new. And I would just kind of go into work the next day and talk to my buddy who I played it at his house. I'd say, hey, I got to Yorm the Giant. And he's like, oh man, how many tries did it take you? Or it's like, hey, I got to the Nameless King. He's like, oh man, that's the hardest fight in the game. How many times did you die to that?
Yeah.
Those experiences. But there were, and like you said, there were times where he'd say, hey, did you find this thing? And I'm like, no, I didn't find this item or this boss or this character. He's like, oh, you got to go back and try to find it again. So I'd either go in New Game Plus or make a brand new character and try to loop back and see, did I do something wrong? Like, there's so many different paths you can go through the game.
Of course, yeah. Because at that point, it's like, would you rather go through the trouble of backtracking all the way to, some place that you completely forgot probably where it even is, or at that point, you just create a new character and then ride out the story from there until you get to whatever it is that, like, someone else may have been talking about.
Exactly. And part of that for me is, like, the experience of the game. I know there are certain people that don't really like backtracking and stuff. Kind of like going back through the same content can be a bit of like a rehash for them.
I'm kind of that way, like in a sense, but like it really depends.
For me, the one thing about Dark Souls, and again, this is mostly Dark Souls 3. I admittedly haven't gone all the way back through Dark Souls 2 or 1 or Demon Souls more than twice, so I know most about Dark Souls 3. But in the third installment, there's a lot of content and things to do, based on, people you talk to and places you go and the order in which you go to those certain places and talk to those certain people. You can change a lot of things about the story. So there's still endings in Dark Souls 3 that I personally haven't achieved that I know of, but I haven't done them myself and I'm going back through them. And for me, that's a really awesome experience.
Have you completed any of the games fully? Like, have you gone through like the whole trophy list?
I haven't really gotten a platinum trophy for Dark Souls 3 yet. There's still some stuff that I haven't done for it. There's a couple endings that I personally haven't achieved, but I would say I'm pretty close.
Okay, gotcha. Cause I'm like kind of weird when it comes to completion and like the completing element within games, because I like, if we take like Hollow Knight for example, I just recently finished Hollow Knight, which is in and of itself like a very Dark Souls influenced game. Not just in
how was the ending of Hollow Knight, by the way?
Oh, it blows you away, quite honestly. And the best thing about it is that it does wrap up a lot of loose ends that like you may not have really understood going into it, but without even like saying a word, it's just like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, I see why it did that, but like,
yeah,
you might have like some questions, like most of the stuff that you have can be answered with just like a Google search. But my point is, my point is that I did most of the stuff in the game just because like most of the time I'm trying to get the most out of my experience within a single playthrough. And a good thing about Hollow Knight is that most of the things that you can do within the game are achievable within a single playthrough. So like, There are some things that like you may not have known about, but like once you see something about it, you can go back in and tie up any loose ends that you may not have had or, never even started to begin with. And there's just like so many things that like you can do, but once it gets to a point where it's no longer fun for me, then I, regardless of what it is, I just stop. So, for example, what I'm saying is I'm like 97% of the way through like the completion process with Hollow Knight, and I just couldn't be bothered to get it to 100% right now. Like even though I realistically could get that platinum trophy, I'm just, like, I guess I'm checked out, so to speak. So,
and it's interesting you bring that up because one of the things about Dark Souls 3 especially is there's a lot of different like endings to the game. There's maybe, I think, 4 different endings.
Okay.
If I'm down the top of my head. But they all are all dictated by, rather, like the certain people you talk to and what you do and, the alliances you choose, basically, with certain covenants and stuff like that. And you literally can't do everything in one playthrough. It's just literally impossible.
I see. Okay.
So if you wanted to go through and do, like the Lord of Hollows ending and then the, Linking the Fire ending and Extinguishing the First Flame ending, like you have to do the game 3 separate times to get all 3 of those sequences.
But that's kind of good though, because then everyone has like their own experience to sort of share, like they have their own unique path that they've taken through the game, so to speak. And
it's part of the beauty of why that game was so fun to go through blind.
Yeah.
For me, I wanted to, for my own taste, I wanted to link the First Flame in my first playthrough, but I made a couple of choices that were incorrect and a couple of misinputs, and I ended up extinguishing the First Flame instead.
Oops.
And I was like, well, this isn't the ending I wanted. I guess I have to play the game again. So I did.
And that you did.
Plus, after the game came out, they released some DLC. 2 DLCs, actually. Ashes of Ariandel and The Ringed City. And both of them injected a ton of life back into the game. And both those DLCs are so incredibly deep.
That's good. I mean, I always value like when like a single player game adds DLC that just like expands upon the world, because I mean, it's so easy to just add something that, you know, like a cosmetic or like whatever it might be, like a little perk that you can purchase like for like $5 or whatever, but like to add like a whole new aspect to the game, like that in and of itself, like I applaud, because it's showing that they're going like that extra mile in order to make this game that much more special for people that may have played it over and over, like you have described. And
Miyazaki did an incredible job with both DLCs. The first one is Ashes of Ariandel, and it takes you into what's called the Painted World, which is this, you know, the whole world of Dark Souls 3 takes place in and around the city of Lothric. It's a big, high-walled city, very stereotypical high fantasy. I was kind of watering it down a bunch, but just to give you a frame of reference, that's kind of how it looks. The Painted World is all frozen. Everything is cold, everything's frozen, and, you know, that dictates the enemies you fight and the bosses you see, and, you know, even, like, the weapons you pick up, they're all, you know, mostly frost-imbued or cold-imbued.
Okay. That's kind of cool.
Even, like, the little, you know, kind of like, and I don't know what you would call them, but the NPCs and the enemies that you kind of just like the cannon fodder, basically, the ones who were super easy to kill, even they're different. Even, you know, the random groups you run into are completely different. And the boss, and I just want to say for my own personal sake that the final boss of the Ashes of Ariandel DLC, Sister Frida, might be my favorite boss in video gaming ever. Just the way it plays out, just how difficult it was, the soundtrack, the movement, how satisfying it felt to beat. It might be my favorite boss of all time in any game.
Wow. So then, taking that into consideration, I guess I should ask you, how do you sort of like rank the games then? Because obviously, I can assume that Dark Souls 3 is your favorite, but like where do you go from there?
Are we including the extended universe or just the Dark Souls games?
Oh, things like Sekiro and whatnot.
Sekiro and Bloodborne, I don't really think I can form a perfect opinion on just yet. Sekiro, I haven't done a ton with, and Bloodborne, I just haven't completed all the way because, frankly, I'm not that good at the games yet. Gotcha.
So yeah, just do the Dark Souls series then.
I would say Dark Souls 3 is my favorite. From what I have done in Bloodborne, because I've done a majority of it, I'd probably say Bloodborne is second. Okay. You could argue 1 or 2 between the two of them, but I'd say Bloodborne second for my taste. And then Dark Souls 2, and then Dark Souls 1. Which is kind of funny because a lot of people don't really like Dark Souls 2. A lot of like the diehard community really disown that game, but I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think I remember you telling me that at one point.
It's a lot of... I'm not really sure how to describe how Dark Souls 2 is. The combat's a lot different from any of the other games. It's a little more floaty, and the art style is slightly different. It's a little more fantastical, if that makes sense. It's not as like grounded in like
super
realism.
Gritty kind of thing. Like,
yeah, it's not as gritty. It's a little more floaty in terms of how like armor feels and how the character feels. Like, there's not as much weight to the swings and the hits and everything like that. It's a little bit slower paced overall, I think, in certain ways. But I personally think the game on its own is really good. And Dark Souls 1 is not far behind 2 either for my own taste. I just don't have as much experience in Dark Souls 1.
Okay. And just for clarification purposes, Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls are 2 completely different things, right?
Yes, they are 2 completely different things.
Okay. I thought so. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, Demon Souls is a completely different entity on its own. There's a lot of carryover from Demon Souls into Dark Souls in terms of like weapons and some bosses even and some places, but nothing like super concrete. But But yes, to answer your question, Demon Souls is its own separate game.
Gotcha. So that, well, at this point, I might as well ask you, why do you consider Dark Souls 3, or just the Dark Souls series in general, like, why is this game series so important to you? Like, do you think that this game has made you think differently in any way, or maybe it changed your perspective on some things, made you kind of reevaluate yourself in a sense?
Outside of the existential pain it's caused me to repeat a boss 27 times in one day, I think it's definitely made an impact on me in terms of how I play different games.
So it's made you a masochist. Okay, I understand.
Yeah, it's made me into 100% a masochist. You can put that MIMDb. Changing my Twitter bio right now. But no, in all seriousness, the Dark Souls series on its own, it's definitely made me play games a lot different. It's definitely made me view games that are like Dark Souls very in a different way.
Sure.
Like, for example, you mentioned Hollow Knight. And I don't have much experience with it, but as you remember, the only time I've played it to date is the time I came over and played it at your place. And
yeah, and you played for like 2-3 hours at that moment.
I felt like I breezed through a lot of it. I the first boss fight that I had, I kind of just, and you remember, it was pretty quick.
It was like you had played it before, to be honest.
Yeah, and it was just kind of a matter of like, okay, I have to watch this guy move. I have to see how he moves and see how long his attack swings take and how long his recovery is and how much time I have to get out of the way. And all that was like not how I would say I was playing games before I played Dark Souls. And
sure. Now
approaching that now, it's definitely gives me a different perspective on video gaming as a whole. And beyond just video games, just the way I assess a challenge. Those games are so tough. They're so damn tough. And
if anything, they're punishing.
Yeah, and it definitely has kind of trained my brain in a way to just like look at that in a different way. And because those games can get under your skin. If you die to the same enemy 7 or 8 times in a row, you really just want to launch a controller through a television.
Yeah, I feel that.
But there is something to be said for kind of understanding the move patterns, and you can even just brute force it. If you're like, you know what, I don't want to deal with these guys, I'm just going to run past them and just see what the most clear way to run past them is. Or if you do want to try and study them one by one and go for it that way, the game just allows you to play it in so many different ways and attack those challenges in so many different ways. And that sense of overcoming that adversity is what makes those games like feel so unique. And I think you mentioned it before about how it's kind of cropped out its own subgenre in a way.
Yeah.
A lot of people do reference different video games as the Dark Souls of their genre. And even, Souls-like games are its own really genre at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely that coin, or that term has definitely been coined regarding like a lot of games that I don't want to say they've copied the style, but they definitely heavily borrow from that like gameplay element, If a game is very unforgiving in its save points, in its boss design, in its movement, it kind of gets dubbed automatically as the Dark Souls of its whatever. Yeah.
I know that we've talked about, we've actually played this together before. We've played Cuphead.
Yes, that's right. I was about to talk about it.
Yeah, Cuphead's that game where it's like, it's like, the Dark Souls of side scrollers.
And it's interesting to see like just how many games are being compared to the series when, I mean, in reality, the difficulty, like it's like any other game. The more you play it, the more adept you are at handling whatever the game throws at you. So, you're saying like, oh, instead of, going at this group of enemies for the 60th time today, I'm just going to figure out a way to run past them and see, what other solutions there might be, just so that I'm aware of like whatever's ahead of them instead of focusing on, this thing that's in front of me. So like, I know in a lot of circumstances, like, and especially in Hollow Knight, like if you get to a boss and it just keeps kicking your ass, whatever you're doing just causes you to just keep losing over and over. Like, it's not because you're bad at the game necessarily. It's because you either haven't prepared yourself enough to get to that point, or like it's just way beyond like any sort of like point that you're supposed to be at, So like these games that really encourage this like exploration aspect, like there's a good chance that you'll encounter like a high level enemy when you're still like level 1 or whatever, you know.
I wish there was a
to
word
do that.
for that.
Yeah.
I wish there was a word or phrase for that, because I feel like there should be, because that happens in a lot of those style games.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but you are right. There is that kind of element that like it really springs these things on you.
Accidental progression, maybe that's the best thing I can think of.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, at that point, because like if you do beat that boss, then like, you know, you're raking in those rewards, even though maybe late game, like that reward would have been like not that significant, but like at the time it's like, oh my god, I have so much money right now. Like
it's something that happened to me the last time my most recent playthrough of DS3. You know, I was kind of cruising through the beginning of the game. I think I beat the first 2 or 3 bosses without even dying once. And
oh wow.
And then I get to the Abyss Watchers, which are another one of my top tier favorite boss fights in video gaming history, and I just kept getting my ass kicked.
Yeah.
And I finally beat them after maybe 12 or 15 deaths probably. And then the next area I was just getting pummeled by all just like the regular base enemies, and I didn't realize, or at least I didn't put too much effort into realizing that I was so under-leveled for those areas.
Yeah.
That it just caught up to me so fast.
Like you didn't put 2 and 2 together at that point.
Yeah, I was just like, you know what? Like, I feel like I should be a lot higher up here, and I was at like soul level 37 trying to go through like the catacombs, and I'm like, this is like not. I feel like I should be a lot higher for this.
Yeah.
And you know, I was trying to experiment with different builds and different stuff like that, and I was just really not in the place I should have been to get through those areas.
And it's funny because, like, obviously, like, the game, like, ramps up in difficulty, like, as you progress through it, like, in different areas and whatnot. But, like, to me, what can be described as difficulty or just, like, in general, like, the most punishing aspect about it, like, going back to, you mentioned Cuphead. I don't really talk about it much on this channel, but, like, I love Cuphead. Like, if there was a game that, like, I could sit down and platinum, like, right now, I would probably go ahead and do it. Just because
if someone interviewed you, you'd talk about Cuphead. Maybe.
Well, I did interview myself in the first episode, but Kingdom Hearts and a few other games, they definitely trump that in a sense.
Well, yeah, and those come first for you. I know you personally. That those games come first. I think the next runner up after those is absolutely Cuphead.
It's just so much fun because the difficulty that comes along with that game, like I never considered myself someone that like chases after this like super challenging sort of like gameplay element or whatever it might be, you know, like whether it is the enemies or like just the style of game. Like I never considered myself that kind of person, but like I wasn't good at Cuphead day one, obviously, but like the game rewards you for trying over and over, so to speak. So it's like whenever you are playing it and you get stuck on a boss, there's always that little progress bar that tells you just how close you were to the very end. And it's just like that like addicting moment in your brain like kicks in and it's like, all right, just one more time. All right, maybe one more time. All right, oh, this time I was so close, but let me do that one more time. So, you know, that part is like, yeah, it's hard, but it's not terribly punishing. So when you go back to something like Dark Souls and you lose to a boss or even like a random like enemy, not only are you thrust back to whatever your last save point was, in this case it's a bonfire, the last bonfire you sat at, you lose all your currency and you lose a little bit of yourself as far as I'm aware. Like
yeah, you go hollow a little bit.
That's right. Can you explain that mechanic? Because I don't know if I really understand it.
So the way hollowing works, and it works different in basically
unless it's like a spoiler, because like I don't know how much of it is a spoiler, but like you can go into it.
I don't think it's a spoiler. It's something that's kind of constant in all of the games. So basically, the character you play as, like they are what's called hollow or going hollow, depending on how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically like a curse. So as you die and come back, you know, your curse is you are able to be revived. You're able to, you know, survive after death and come back again as yourself, but you lose a little piece of yourself as you go.
Like a little bit of your humanity, so to speak.
That's literally exactly what it is.
Okay.
In certain games like Dark Souls 1 and 2, you can find a literal pickup items called a humanity. And like in Dark Souls 2 is the one I think has a bit more of an aggressive look at the hollowing. Basically, when you die and come back, you have less total health. So the more you...
Well, that sounds annoying. I'll say that much.
It can be... It incentivizes getting good and not going too far ahead of yourself. So, in Dark Souls 2, for example, as you die and come back, you have less health. And what that does is it makes it so that you have to be a lot better. But to get all your full health back, you have to literally restore your humanity. Find a humanity and restore it back to yourself. In Dark Souls 2, they call it a human effigy. So you consume that, and then it says humanity restored, and your health is back, and you look normal. Because when you go hollow, your skin starts to deteriorate. You look like a corpse. Like your eyes start to go hollow, your mouth starts to go hollow, and your skin turns all gray. But when you restore it, you go back to being, your beautiful or horrifying looking creature you've made.
this beautiful little character that you've made.
Yeah, if you're romping around as like Shrek, you go back to looking like Shrek.
You got like a 3-foot nose, like, maybe you were better off missing a nose, like at that point.
Sometimes you look better when you're hollowed. And hollowing is a very interesting, and from a lore aspect too, it's very interesting. There's a lot of people in the game. Dark Souls 3 has a character, an NPC, his name's Holy Knight Hodrick.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see him, he asks you if you're a hollow. And you can say yes or no. If you say no, he trusts you, and he's kind of very skeptical. If you can say yes, even, and he just laughs it off. And then he says, he tells you, be well and don't you dare go hollow. But as you see, there's a path you can go down to go back to him, and he himself ends up hollowing and going mad.
Oh, wow.
And it basically, again, like when you lose all your humanity, you go fully hollow, you lose all of your, humanity as a concept too.
And so I'm guessing that like that can happen to you in the game then, like what happens to you at that point? Like, are you you can't regain any humanity at that point, or?
Well, you can. I mean, as a game mechanic, you are able to always regain your humanity.
I see. Okay.
But for the other people in the world, it's kind of assumed that basically, like when you if you come back too many times, you just become a husk. Basically, you just become this animated corpse. And you don't have what's left of yourself, and that's part of the reason why. And maybe this is a bit of I don't know if it's a spoiler per se, but everybody in the world is basically hollow, and
or at least they have some element of it, so to speak.
Right. Most characters have some element of it in them, if they are human, and for Hodrick, when he hollows, it's like you're running around and you kind of find him back where you go, and where you meet him initially, and he's just instantly hostile, and you're like, oh my god, what happened to you? and then you realize like, oh, he's gone hollow, and like you're doing him a favor. And it's the same,
like breaking that curse almost.
It's the same with a couple other characters in the game. A couple of fan favorites, which I don't want to spoil in case someone does want to try it for themselves.
Yeah,
there are a couple of characters, spoiler warning, that do go hollow, and if you follow their path, the way the game intends you to, you end up seeing them go hollow, and you have to be you have to kind of do them the mercy of kind of ending that cycle for them.
Interesting. Huh. Well, outside of the actual like lore aspect and everything like within the game, like touching on the just the gameplay itself, like I know that like we talked a little bit about like how the series has effectively become a genre in and of itself. Like, are there any other games that you would describe as like Dark Souls-esque that you've played? Because like I have a few of them, and I know I can like speak on that. But I was just curious like where you were, because since you're so into the actual like Dark Souls kind of element, are you like, do you look at all games that way, or like even games that are Dark Souls oriented, like do you consider them like easier than like some other ones that you've played? I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I can think of a couple off the top of my head, actually. For starters, I think one of the first games I played that was kind of touted as like a Dark Souls clone or copy was
Souls-like, so to speak.
Souls-like is the best way for it, is Lords of the Fallen.
Okay.
It's the same sort of third-person, over-the-shoulder, high fantasy RPG. The one thing that makes Lords of the Fallen a lot different is everything feels super heavy. A lot of the attacks are very slow. A lot of the weapons are very heavy. And it's definitely, one of the big criticisms of that game was, it's a ripoff of Dark Souls. And to be completely honest, it definitely is.
Okay.
But I still had fun with it because I just liked that style of game. Another one I can think of right now, I'm actually started playing it recently, is called Mortal Shell.
Yeah. I was going to say,
Shell,
I feel like we were talking about that at one point.
It's got a couple of mechanics that make it stand out from the standard Souls-like romp around. So there are some interesting factors in that game. And a lot of the criticisms of it are, if you want to play a game like this, just play Dark Souls. But I always like to experiment and see other kinds of games that have that same formula. So, if a game resembles another game, I don't consider it a criticism as much as if it does something interesting with that idea, I still think it's good. And Mortal Shell, so far, I'm very, very new into the game, very fresh into it, but from what I've seen, it's a lot of fun.
Honestly, I think that's kind of like a weird criticism to have too, because like if they say, oh, if you want to play this game, just go play Dark Souls. Well, what if you already played Dark Souls and you're just looking for more?
What if I just don't want to?
Yeah, like honestly, like
what if I don't want that pain in my life?
Like at that point, just I don't know. Like that's like saying like, oh, you've played like Super Mario 64. Why don't you just go play fucking, I don't know, like Banjo-Kazooie or something? Like like at that point, like it's just like the same thing. And
right. And I think that a lot of games can get criticized for that. And I think that criticism can stand up depending on the game, but a lot of times, just take the game as a piece of art for what it's worth. Like a game like Mortal Shell, for example, I can obviously see the criticisms of, oh, it's very similar to Dark Souls. It is, and I don't think the developers of that game would even, if you asked them, I think they would probably agree to the same thing too. It's got a lot of the same mechanics. R1 is your light attack, R2 is your heavy attack, circle is your dodge. When you die, you lose what you've gained, and you have to come back again. It's got some healing elements are very sparse. Enemies hit super hard. Bosses are very difficult. Like, it's all just like the Dark Souls formula. But that doesn't mean that following that formula means you've made a bad game.
No, not at all.
It's the same with, and we're both musicians. It just because rock and roll has been around for forever, just because rock music has been a thing for so long, doesn't mean that if you're inspired by a certain artist, you're making bad music. Oh yeah. If you like Metallica, then why don't you just go listen to Van Halen or something? Like right, or if your band looks up to Metallica and someone's like, yeah, I could just go back and listen to Metallica. It's like, well, you could.
Exactly.
I hope you listen to my music because I think it's really nice. And it's telling a different story than what, if you've already listened to Metallica so many times, then it's like, okay, I know what that has. Now let's move on to something else. So right, if you go to a show and a guy's like, oh, this is just a big ripoff of, the Black Album from Metallica. And it's like, okay, and if it's really not good, then it will sound like a cheap ripoff. Yeah. But if it's if it's influenced by the Black Album by Metallica, then it's a whole different perspective. And that's a good point to make, because it's like there is a distinct difference between like borrowing elements or just like being inspired by something and just being a blatant ripoff. Because, I think what a lot of people fail to understand is just how much of an impact Dark Souls has on the gaming community. Like, aside from the whole, like, oh, the Dark Souls of X, Y, and Z, like, there's so much that it spawned, like, difficult bosses and, like, even, like, using the triggers to attack. Like, that wasn't the norm, like, it was always, oh, like, X and square or square and triangle. Like, even the newest, like, God of War game, I don't know if you've ever played that or not, but,
the default control scheme is like, if you want to throw your axe, you hold down L2, but any other attacks, are R1 and R2. And yeah, you can change it to the other button options, but I think it's just interesting to point out that like a series that had no business being anywhere like remotely similar to Dark Souls, like especially within like the first few games, they play completely differently.
Oh, absolutely.
The fact is that this kind of influence has reached beyond anything else that like people just don't seem to understand like how significantly it's impacted the gaming sphere in general, and
it's made an incredible impact on it.
Yeah.
And I think that, like you said, God of War has borrowed that from, the Dark Souls makeup of things. And I don't
want to say that it is directly from Dark Souls. Like that could very well be like from something else, but that I think that even just furthers my point. Like if that other influence got something from Dark Souls, then like in retrospect, like by the order of things, like then that's ultimately where it would have come from,
Yeah, and sharing that common thread, like the new God of War game, I think is universally recognized as an absolute masterpiece.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And I don't think that anyone would ever say that, if that was something that, those guys did get from Dark Souls, I don't think that anyone would say God of War ripped them off.
No, not at all.
It's just a matter of taking what works and going from there. There's a really good quote from Leonard Bernstein. He was a 20th century, composer, teacher of music, and it's a quote that I learned in high school. It's always stuck with me. Is if you're a good composer, you steal good steals.
Yeah, that's true.
Which basically means that, like if you want to do well in making whatever you're making, you're going to borrow good stuff that someone most likely borrowed from somebody else.
Yeah, and I think it was even in a, like, to be even more niche, like even in a drumming aspect, it was like, you want to be a good drummer, play someone else's fills. Like there's no shame in, just like, even if you're just using it to practice, like it's there for a reason. Like just play it.
I'll completely out myself on the fact that a lot of the fills that I play are either iterations of or direct rips of stuff that I've heard other drummers do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of songs that I'll play and I'll do some fill, and Tyler O'Connor will say, "Oh, that was a great fill," and I'll just say, "Hey, that's a Joey Jordison lick." And it's like, or it's just from a song. I change the tempo or change the stick pattern, and make it something that's individually mine, but conceptually is completely somebody else's.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you're ripping them off. It's more or less just like, I mean, if you're able to be, I think Dave Grohl said it recently, actually, or maybe it's been like a long-standing quote of his, but he even said, he's like, what I think makes a good drummer is being able to listen to them play and recognizing their ability,
Absolutely.
So you don't want to make someone else's like style your own, but it could be a good stepping stone for whatever else you are trying to encapsulate. Like if you want this to be a part of just your style of playing, then like so be it. But as long as you can, make a name for yourself using it, like I personally don't really see any shame in that.
I don't either personally, and I think that taking inspiration from something that was genuinely inspired to begin with is really just kind of the essence of like creating in an art form, in any kind of creative outlet, like if somebody wants to, for example, become a painter, you're not the first person who's ever picked up a brush. So just by itself, you're not the world's first painter. If you're, I want to paint a picture, with the skies green. You're probably not the first person to ever do that. But how you interpret the ideas in your head and the inspiration you have, and where you learned and how you interpret how you were taught, dictates the final product, and that makes it unique.
Of course, yeah, it really is that just that artistic element, like. There's been like multiple arguments like, oh, are we ever going to run out of melodies, or like are we ever going to run out of like original ideas? And I mean, it's like at that point, I mean, maybe, but who cares? Like
Right.
as long as
Like, who
as long
cares?
as it evokes something, if it's music, like if it gets you moving, or like if it's art, like it makes you feel things. Like that's how
I'm
I
not
personally
writing-
view it.
I'm not writing music to make something that's never been made before. I'm writing music to have a good time and make somebody jump up and down and bang their head.
Yeah.
That's all. And if I've done that, then I've done a good job. That's how I feel. Is if I can transfer my energy into what I'm creating and move it forward, then I've more than done my job. And I've done something that, frankly, to me feels really, really amazing.
Yeah.
And moving back into creating a video game, like that's such a passion project for everybody involved with those things,
Yeah,
like,
and people really
sometimes,
like sort of undermine like how many people are involved in like a team when it comes to building these games. Like there's many different perspectives, many different minds being put into, more often than not, a single game. Not everyone gets a sequel.
And there's so many things that have to go right for it to go well. You have to have good art direction and guys who are able to make that happen, and like a team of men and women that are able to realize the vision you have as a creator, and people who are willing to buy into the product you have and the ideas you have and help share that vision. And then like a game like Dark Souls, where not only do you have to create this incredible game, you also have to create this absolute kick-ass, oh my god, amazing orchestra soundtrack.
Yeah. Something equally as important.
Which, they sell the soundtrack on vinyl for Dark Souls 3.
Yeah.
It's that good, and it's that amazing, and the scope of it is really awesome. And I think one of the things that I will always remember about Dark Souls 3 especially is there's two fights in the game. Ironically, they are of the same type of character. One is Vort of the Boreal Valley, and one is the Dancer of the Boreal Valley.
Vort of the Boreal Valley.
Yeah,
I don't know why, but hearing that, it's just like it sounds like it's fun to say, so I had to say it out loud, kind of thing.
Yeah, it really is. And they're both tied into the lore together.
Okay.
They're two very different fights. Vort is like a monster. He's on all fours. He runs around like crazy. He runs around all over the place like crazy, and when the fight starts, it shows a little cutscene. He spews this frost into the air. When it cuts back to the game, this absolute massive orchestra starts playing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
in the first fight of the game, Udex has some good music, but you don't really experience anything like it up until Vort, when it just screams into life, and the entire fight feels so chaotic because Vort's a chaotic creature, and this music is just so in your face. And the whole fight feels so tense, and like going back through, it's one of the easier bosses, but I always love fighting it because of that music. Always gets me energized and gets that like anticipation up.
Well, you should take that and listen to it at the gym.
Yeah, absolutely. It would. I'm gonna stop taking pre-workout. I'm just gonna listen to the Dark Souls soundtrack whenever I go work out.
Perfect. Couldn't have said it better.
The perfect counter to that is the Dancer of the Boreal Valley. As it would imply, spoiler alert, the Dancer is a dancer.
Whoa.
Sorry. You're gonna have to put a spoiler warning on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to bleep that out, man.
Yeah, just click ahead and just, you can skip that part. I'm really sorry I let that one slip. But one of the cool things about her fight is all of her movements look like dances. It's a lot of spinning and a lot of really beautiful motions, and the music is equally intense since it is a big boss fight. It's one of the harder boss fights in the game, in my opinion. Also one of the most well-directed ones. And the music is just beautiful for that entire fight. It's tense, and it's got these nice notes, and it swirls and moves around. Almost feels like the dancer is like dancing to the soundtrack that's playing as you're fighting it.
Wow.
And those two experiences especially are just so vivid with that, with that creation. And I think about those two specifically as like, wow, like those two single fights are just such a perfect culmination of everything, like we said, like that you try to create with a creative project, making that really special connection between, you know, everything from the guy who designed the blades of grass to, you know, like violin number 4.
Yeah.
Like
honestly.
every single person working together to make that sound and feel and look and play so powerfully.
Yeah. And on that note, I think it's a good thing to say that by all means, that absolutely makes a great game as well as a really good choice for a favorite game, if you ask me. So just to wrap it up, I want to say, going back to the conversation we had where like games like borrow elements from each other, you know, if I had to say like one game that's like a copy, well, I won't say a copy, but like heavily borrows, and then a game that like is similar but still has its own unique style. If like the most Souls-like of all Souls-likes that I've played is a game series called The Surge, and that much, like, the game is fun. Again, I don't know if it was the gameplay or whatever it might have been, but I didn't get super far into it. But it definitely felt like Dark Souls, except with just like a different coat of paint. Which is not to say that that's a bad thing. Like, it was still fun because of that, but you know, it definitely comes across as like the most similar in terms of a gameplay experience. And then another game that I played relatively recently, I think a couple months ago, that I didn't realize was actually Souls-like until I finished it, was Jedi Fallen Order. And the thing about Jedi Fallen Order is that it has that element where it's like I think you use the the triggers to do attacks and things like that, but like it wasn't until later that I realized, like, you know, the whole lock-on mechanic and like dodging out of the way, kind of like almost like trading attacks, so to speak, like being patient with your boss battles and things like that. Like, I didn't realize that like that element is so like prevalent in other games. Oh, and on top of that, like, you know, once you die, you get sent back to the last thing that you saved at. Like, that is also a thing in that game. So it's like, oh, well, no wonder people think that this is a Souls-like. Like, even though
Jedi Fallen Order is an incredible game.
Yeah, and it completely glossed over my mind just because I'm like, oh, this is Star Wars. Why would they do that? But like, in that context, it really works. Like, it really does. And
this is the Dark Souls of space opera.
This is the Star Wars of Dark Souls, so to speak.
Whoa.
But,
I heard that backwards when you said it, and I was like, wait a second, what did you just say?
that took me a second, yeah. But yeah, I think on that note, that's a good place to stop for Dark Souls. So let's move on to another game that you supposedly have even more to talk about. Let's move on to the Divinity Original Sin series. So the things that I know about this game, I mean, Divinity Original Sin 2 I know a little bit more about than the first one, but you know, the things that I do know are, well, I mean, the things that you told me. So besides that, what I do know is that it's available on almost every platform out there, including Nintendo Switch and even iPad as of September, which is super impressive. Like, $25 and 18 gigabytes, like, not so bad for a game of this caliber. Like I mean, it absolutely could be worse, but
not
like,
bad at all.
Yeah. Other than that, like, I know that it's about as immersive as RPGs can get. Like, almost everything you do has some sort of active repercussion, and the stories all intertwine with each other. So I think it's safe to say that it's basically D&D in video game form. Is that right?
I would have to agree with that sentiment. It is the short version of the answer to that is I would say Divinity is probably my favorite single game of all time.
Wow.
In terms of the experience I had with it, in terms of how connected I was to the world, just in one playthrough. And I've done 2 since then, but just in that first playthrough, how much the world really gripped me and got me into the game, and how much content there was. It's probably my favorite game I've ever played.
That's amazing.
That is, and that's no joke. So basically how I got into it was...
Yeah, so yeah, like, what made you interested in it, I should say? Like, do you remember how you discovered it?
Yeah, so basically my cousin Brendan, who I play a lot of my games with, we were playing a lot of games through, obviously, with the lockdown and not really going anywhere, having a bunch of games to play and trying new stuff. Actually, I should probably backtrack further than that, so let's try this one more time.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, to kind of start the trajectory of how I got into Divinity, a few years before that, my cousin Brendan, who I play a lot of my games with and hang out with a bunch, he got me into Dungeons and Dragons, D&D, which you mentioned a second ago here, and it was something that I really got into. D&D is a lot of fun for me. It became an obsession of mine. Now I own like 10 sets of polyhedral dice, which is a common symptom of getting into Dungeons and Dragons.
You were calling us in to play, like you were the DM, and we had no idea what the hell was going on. So
yeah,
the epitome of being a D&D fan, you know.
It's something that I really, really enjoy. I mean, if we were talking about games outside of just the video game realm, Dungeons and Dragons, I could go on for days about. It's a universe I really enjoy. It's something I really like to learn about and homebrew stuff for. That's a discussion for a whole different video. We could go on for days about that. But moving forward into that, I kind of appreciated the high fantasy magic art, medieval fantasy thing that I kind of gained an appreciation for the medieval high fantasy of Dungeons and Dragons. The universe it was building, things like Lord of the Rings and franchises like that also deal in that like high magic medieval fantasy type genre. And I started to just branch into other games, and Divinity Original Sin came up as a game that one of my cousin's mutual friends had played. He recommended to us. He said it was phenomenal, and we went to go give it a try, and me and him both played it together. We played the entire game together. It's basically the way it works is it's a 4-person party, but you can choose to either go as any combination of 1 to 4. If you go 2 or less, it gives you a boost, so your character does a little bit more damage to compensate, but also there's only 2 people working, so it makes that harder just by numbers overall. And we just did they call it a lone wolf playthrough of just.
And you're playing at the same time, like within the same game, right?
Yeah, it's like basically, I wouldn't say it's an online multiplayer experience because we weren't like playing with other people outside, just the 2 of us. But we did play multiplayer together on our own systems.
Sure. In a weird way, it's almost like how MMOs like have people traveling around a world at the same time. Like it's almost like that.
It's a lot of contradictory. It was like an online multiplayer singles experience for just the 2 of us with no other outside help.
Yeah.
Like we basically made a little private server and played it that way.
Almost like if you could play an MMO, but like you're the only person in the entire universe. Like that. Yeah, that's how it would be.
And in any other like RPG, that might make the world feel super lonely. Like I can't imagine what it'd be to be the only person like in like the RuneScape hub. That'd feel really awkward.
Yeah, seriously.
But we got through that game, and it was one of the long games I've ever played. I want to say, start to finish, I believe the first playthrough was 90 hours.
Man.
And we didn't even do everything.
Oh yeah.
There was a lot of backtracking.
I have like over 100 hours in like games that aren't even close to the amount of stuff that's in there.
Right. Yeah, and there was a lot of backtracking, like things that we, trying to beat a boss, trying to get to an area that we weren't supposed to get to yet. We talked about being underleveled for stuff. We were really trying to beat certain bosses that we thought we could do. And sometimes we'd succeed, other times we'd have to go all the way back and go around that area of the game. But there was so much in that game that just... kind of like how when I first got into Dark Souls, it just pulled me in, and the more I got pulled in, the more I realized how much was in these games, and I just kept going further and further and further, and we were just like, oh, we have to keep playing this game, and it was so much fun to go through, and connecting with that world was just such a blast for both of us.
And I feel like some of the best experiences you can have with games are ones that you can share with other people, and you might have a memory within a game, but like if another person has that exact same memory, it's like it's almost like that much more magical.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, whenever
quite literally in this sense, you're dealing with magic here. So
right, when he and I both finished that game, we were both like very emotionally drained. Like getting to the end, we got to the final act of the game, and I will do my best to avoid all spoilers, because I think that everybody who listens to this, if I can impart any knowledge or wisdom, it is to just get out there and play Divinity Original Sin 2. So I will avoid all spoilers and all catches like that with it. But
good call.
We got to the last act of the game, the last maybe hour or so, and you kind of get a feel for, what you have to do and what's going to go on. And we were like distraught because we knew that there was going to be a lot of character development that was going to come to a close. There was going to be a lot of plot development that was going to come to a close, and not all of it was going to be satisfying. Not all the things that we wanted to happen were going to happen.
Sure.
And we were legitimately distraught. We knew that, hey, death was on the table for certain characters, and we did not want that. And it literally left us kind of stunned at the end of things. We really needed a minute.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, if you're trying to have a game that replicates life as accurately as possible, that's in and of itself a huge aspect of it. You don't get to make the best decisions, you don't get to make things that you want to happen, but in a sense, there's a lot of things that could be done differently, and luckily there are ways to go about it, but sometimes you get faced with those tough decisions, and it's that much more memorable in that sense.
And I think that's what made the game so incredibly memorable. One of the things about how that game is with my interaction with it that made it so special for me, and what makes it my favorite game ever, is the interaction with the world is very unique based on how you play the game and even which character you choose. From the moment you select a character, that dictates a certain set of experiences your character is going to have in the world. And with that selection, each character, there's 6 major characters that are created by the game, pre-made characters basically. You can make your own custom character as well. But all 6 of those characters, if you, for example, there's the Red Prince. If you pick the Red Prince, you get to play with his story, and, certain characters interact with him in different ways because of who he is. Certain dialogue options are not available to certain characters. So okay. The Red Prince can say certain things to certain people, but can't say certain things to others. Or he might not even meet certain NPCs. Or he might meet a couple special people and go to certain places that other characters can't.
Yeah. So in a sense, you choose your own path, but in the same way, people treat you differently. Based on what you choose.
I think it's less choosing your own path as much as choosing the shoes you walk in on that path.
I see. Okay.
Because, for example, if you don't pick the Red Prince, let's say you want to pick Sabil, the elf, or Ifan, the human, the Red Prince is a lizard. If you don't want to pick him, you'll see the Red Prince in your game. So he becomes an NPC, and he can potentially be a companion for you.
So that's where that stories intertwining aspect kind of comes into play.
Exactly. And all 6 people, technically 7 if you count the custom characters, all 7 playable characters interact with the main story in a completely different way.
Wow. So
the motivations for the Red Prince, using that example still, the motivations for him to get to the end game, to get to the last boss per se, are completely different from why Sabil or your custom character would want to get to there. There's a different set of knowledge they're looking to obtain. There's a different end goal they have. An interaction with, each character has a god they interact with, and it's a god of their race. The god of the humans, the god of the elves, dwarves,
sure.
all that. And they all have a different motivation for why you need to do the things the game's going to ask you to do. So not only are you completing, the main quest of the game itself per se, but you're also completing an objective to save the race you've chosen. You're also completing a personal objective, so each character has their own personal kind of redemption arc, if you will, of something they want to achieve, since basically the world is ending, and they have something they need to do. So it's linked together on so many levels, and who you pick and how you interact with different people dictates how that story is going to affect you.
That's really fascinating. Like, there's not that many games out there that really encapsulate that like level of detail, you know, and especially considering, like, I mean, from what I've seen you play, I personally own the game. I've never actually like gotten a chance to boot it up. I think I mainly bought it so I could play with you guys, but you know,
we're gonna have to.
I'm absolutely down for it. We just never had the chance to get into it. I know from what I've seen that like a lot of dialogue options are like in a sense, like, you know, going back and comparing it to D&D. I mean, in D&D you can pretty much say whatever you want. The dialogue options that are reflected within Divinity, they're about as diverse as they can be, while still filling in that like your character's personality, so to speak.
Right. It's something that I think a lot of games advertise and almost none really achieve, is that, you know, I think it's something that was a big renaissance in like the early 2000s and into like the 2010s. I'm still not sure what to call that decade. There's no nice sounding word for that. But
yeah, I guess like 7th gen consoles, 8th gen consoles, like,
yeah, that's honestly better than saying the 2010s, honestly.
Yeah.
I like it a lot better. But the around that time, you know, games like Mass Effect and, you know, I think that's the one that comes to mind the most, is of games that kind of were like, oh, the choices you make are going to change the world around you. And Mass Effect is a great game. I'm not dogging on the Mass Effect series at all. I think those are fantastic games.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of games copied that idea of the choices you make are going to change the way you interact with the world. And frankly, a lot of times they don't. You know, like in like a game like I think of, and this is a game that I love, but Skyrim. You know, I think most people at least, have a very vivid connection, or they have a love for the Elder Scrolls series, specifically Skyrim for a lot of our generation.
Not me. I still never played Skyrim,
but we'll fix that.
Good. I mean, you and Steve are harping on me to get on it, so.
Yeah, but you know, that game, it kind of is an open world game. You can go anywhere. You can do essentially anything. But, you know, a lot of the quests and the choices you make with certain characters, you don't really feel like they impact the world too heavily. You know, if somebody says, hey, you know, give this item back to a certain shopkeeper and he gives you 200 gold pieces for it, like, oh, that's great. But you could, when that guy goes to bed, you can steal all of his stuff. And he's never going to know. And then when you get to the end of the game, you know, whether you've been a goody two-shoes and never racked up a bounty one time, or, you know, half of the map wants you dead, that doesn't change how the end of the game will play out for you. Everyone will still celebrate the fact that you're the Dragonborn. Yeah,
like you still finished this overarching plot, you know?
Right, whereas in Divinity, you know, for example, you can literally have the game end where every single thing that you hold sacred is just gonna wipe itself off the face of the earth.
Yep, just gone.
Like you can just royally screw it up and like have nothing left, and then the game ends. You know, and that's the ending that you got. Like, yeah,
and you did that. Like, that's not you like being shoehorned through the plot of the game. Like,
right, like for example, when you die in that game, like your spirit kind of floats above your body. And you need a resurrection scroll to get brought back. Now, if playing with somebody else, if, you know, both characters die, then it's game over. You got to load back to where you were before. But, you know, going on the example of playing with my cousin through that game, if I die in a combat and he just doesn't want to pick me up, he doesn't have to. Like, okay. he could just, I mean, it'd be rude, but he could just like see me die and go like, oh man, you really suck at this game. Well, I'll see you later.
How dare you?
There was more than one time. There was more than one occasion where one of us had to finish a fight without the other, and had to, for a decent bit of time, like go on without the other character just to go into town and buy a resurrection scroll and come back.
Wow.
And
that whole time you're just dead. That's it.
It was never long. It was never longer than maybe like 5 minutes or so. But there was a lot of times where you're just like, "Oh, I'm dead. I'm just gonna check my phone and see what's going on." And and then he's like, "Oh yeah, I got my resurrection scroll." And you kind of tune back in, and okay, now I'm back in the game again.
Sweet. Okay.
And those sort of choices, like that sort of like openness in the game is super rare. And like you mentioned, we've compared it to Dungeons and Dragons several times, and I think that's really the only close analog for that game. Is it's really just D&D, like encompassed down into, or it's really just D&D broken down into a digestible, slightly more digestible, like video game format.
And that's like a real consequence, like you really don't see in a lot of games like, oh, you die, therefore your party member has to literally go somewhere to revive you. Like in most games, I mean, going back, like we just finished talking about Dark Souls, like when you die, of course there's repercussions, you start all the way back to where you were, but that kind of experience in Divinity is like, oh, I am dead. I can't do anything for like 5 minutes. And even though it is 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes that you're not going to get back by doing something else. You know what I mean?
Right. And that kind of, those consequences are always real. So it feels like the game has a lot of real gravity all the time. And there's no, obviously you can save and reload a place. I mean, we did that plenty. That's why I probably wouldn't say it's 90 hours of like straight, progression in my first playthrough. I don't even know what I could approximate at, but we did a lot of going backwards and maybe, okay, let's see how this works. And then we both die instantly. Like, okay, we can't one-shot that guy. We need to go back. Let's reload. And those consequences feel real all the time.
Yeah.
If you go into an area that you get a bad, you go through a dialogue and you make a bad choice, there is no option B. If you piss that person off and they want to kill you, there's no word you can say to make them not want to kill you anymore.
So is there like, I mean, this might be sacrilege, but is there a sense of like save scumming that can be done? Like,
yeah,
I'm sure you can save at some point and then like go back to your old one, or is that not a thing?
No, you absolutely can. There is a mode in the game where you can do a permadeath run.
Okay. Where
if you're dead, you're just dead, and you have to go back to like level 1 on everything and restart the whole game. Which, for as long as that game is, I would not want to ever do that.
That's like Fire Emblem. Like for a game that's much tamer than Divinity. Like that, like even permadeath, like in that aspect is like, oh man, like you're like, it's awful.
And to be completely honest, I'd be lying if I said I didn't do a little bit of save scumming when I played Divinity.
Yeah.
Mostly in the interest of if there was a certain, thing we wanted to do, or a certain way we wanted to try to go, or a certain dialogue option we wanted to see play out. Let's just save and let's see what this does.
Sure.
Or if, and the game's pretty liberal with how many saves you're allowed to have.
Oh, okay.
So it's not like a super limited amount. I think it almost, I don't want to say it promotes save scumming, but it definitely does leave it open. So that way the experience is, basically as hardcore as you'd want it to be.
I see.
If you don't want to save, if you want to make your saves rather like vacant, then you can do that. Or if you want to save every 35 seconds, you can also do that too.
Okay, so it encourages like, I mean, well, I should say it doesn't encourage anything, but it can accommodate like any sort of play style,
Yeah, actually that's probably the perfect way to put it, is that Divinity doesn't encourage anything. It doesn't encourage a play style, it doesn't encourage a dialogue choice. Whenever you're talking to like the scripted moments in the game, when you go and meet your you go meet your god and you realize that like the entire pantheon is being disrupted by the the main people at play. I'm really trying to avoid as many spoilers as possible because this game is so incredibly connected. But basically all the gods are dying and they're being killed off. And it is, your god obviously doesn't want to be one that dies, so you're a chosen, you're like a chosen one, and you're going to fight off what are called the Void Woken, which are like the main bad, evil creatures in the game.
Sure,
You're chosen by your god to, like carry out this quest. And
defend them in a sense.
Certain characters, they all interact with their gods different ways. Some of them take it on as like a noble, like I'm gonna be a champion, and or like the Red Prince, for example, he's from a noble family, and he's been like removed, and he's trying to regain his noble power. Nobody else gives a damn about his nobility because he's not part of a family that's anywhere near anybody else. So he's trying to regain his respect for. He sees himself as the greatest thing since sliced bread, and no one else gives a damn.
Okay,
so
I see.
He's very arrogant, and he wants to kind of like ground that arrogance for other people around him. There's a character called Ifon, one of my favorites in the entire game, who's a playable character. And he's done a lot of terrible things in his life. He's done a lot of things that he like deeply regrets. And in a way, you can choose to play him however you'd like based on the dialogues you pick with your god, because your god throws all that up in your face when you talk to him. And you can either repent and be like sorry for what you've done, or you can just double down and be like, no, go to hell, man. Like literally. Like
I see. Okay.
You can either like say, I'm not doing this for you, I'm doing this because I want my own material things, or you can like really play into it. So each character individually has their own back and forth play on like how you think that character should interact with things based on their experiences and how you want to be.
And so I guess I probably should have asked this like near the beginning, but your experiences mostly revolve around Divinity 2, right?
Divinity Original Sin 2 is the one that I've played extensively. I've played a decent bit of Divinity Original Sin, like the original Sin, I guess.
Yeah.
But not a ton. It's kind of like the Dark Souls thing where I got into it with the second game, mainly because I saw it, and again, it was recommended to me, but one of the things outside of the recommendations I got was it is incredibly highly rated.
Yeah.
All of the critical
Steam,
acclaim.
It's like overwhelmingly positive.
When I got it, it might be different now. Those rankings always change, but it was one of like the top 15 or 20 highest ranked games on the entire site.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And I was looking at it, and there was a bunch of other AAA titles in that area. Games like Portal and all the other, Half-Life 2, and games that are consistently in the top rankings in Steam. And then I saw this game, and I'm like, I've never heard of this. I don't know who Larian Studios is. I don't know anything about this game. It looks really interesting, and I really, really like got interested in what they were making, and I'm thinking, how on earth is this game so well rated with all these other titans of gaming, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I don't know how much of it you were paying attention to, like the existence like before it really like came to fruition.
Very little, to be honest.
Okay, because like when I was doing my research, like I don't know if you knew this, but Divinity Original Sin was already like super successful. Like people love that game. And
yeah, I knew that it had done pretty well. The first one had done very well for itself.
Yeah, and so how they made the second game happen is they put the game up on Kickstarter in order to, of course, fund the game and make sure that it lived up to everyone's expectations. Well, they put it out there, and then in 12 hours, the game reached its goal. So.
Oh my God! Well, how high was the goal?
So if that shows the dedication to like the fans of this franchise, the goal was $500,000. So. Oh
my God!
Yeah, $500,000 in the span of 12 hours, and the crew, like the team, was getting ready to go to PAX Prime to promote. I assume to promote the game, and to this day, it's since garnered over $2 million in funding.
Oh my God!
So. $2 million to put together what effectively you're considering a masterpiece,
And those guys absolutely deserve it too.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like what I can say about it that someone else hasn't already said, but outside of my own personal experience. But like Larian Studios has created an absolute masterpiece of a game, and to think that it was crowdfunded for $500,000 that fast that's like $500,000, man. That's a lot of money.
And I mean, well, as I mentioned earlier, like supposedly the first game's Kickstarter campaign was also super successful because that one reached funding in only 12 days. So, which is still very impressive, but 12 hours is just unheard of. I mean,
like you go to bed and come back and your game's done, basically.
Yeah, they were literally like, they put it out there and they were getting ready to go to this convention to talk about their game, and it had already been funded. Like that, that would like to say that they were like overwhelmed is a fair understatement, I would say. So
yeah, stunned. I don't think there's a word in the English dictionary that can properly describe how that feeling is. And again, like Larian, like to this, I'm talking directly to Larian Studios here. You did a great job, and you continue to do a great job. So thank you for creating an incredible masterpiece, and continue to, because you guys they're working on Baldur's Gate 3 right now.
That's right.
Which I could not be more excited for.
And we'll definitely be able to touch on that in the news segment that happens a little bit later in the episode. But yeah, for a game of this quality, I mean, like, considering that the fans were super happy with the first release, like, there was no way they were going to pass up another opportunity like this. Like, they absolutely want to get, like, not only do you get, like, the perks from, backing the project, like, you get all, like, the fun goodies, like, the shirts and the hoodies and all that crap, but, like, even so, like, if they can fund a series that's just so revolutionary in, like, what it's doing, like, of course they're going to do it, because, like, I personally, I love going back and looking at these Kickstarter pages for big projects such as these, just to kind of, like, see what kind of tiers they were offering. Like, they offered all sorts of crazy things, like all the way up to a 10K tier, so like $10,000, and it promised a portrait of you to be designed and made and included in the game, while also being printed, framed, and mailed to you, on top of a bunch of other signed material and exclusive goods. Like, they sent out this, like, basically, like, all this, like, super exclusive content that, like, you are getting just for being, like, this, like, ridiculously generous person. And
that's actually awesome.
Yeah, seriously, like, imagine a picture. I mean, for you especially, like, I could imagine you being, like, made in a way that would be like included in a fantasy realm like that.
That would be I think I would be super stunned if I was opening up a Larian Studios game and it's like, oh, hey, there's my face in there.
Yeah, seriously. And it's like, it's a shame that you didn't know about it until like after the game had been made. But, for people going into that experience, like, and they were fully aware that, yeah, this game is going to make some waves, then, I could see, like, that being, like, a super, super rewarding feeling. And with some other tiers, like they were generous with their tiers. Like, some of the other ones were like, come and meet us for lunch kind of thing. Like, others were like, you get to be a part of the official release party. Like, tons of crazy stuff. Like,
that would be super cool.
Yeah, I just love looking at those. Like, and the stretch goals they had in mind. Like, it's just wondering, like, what it would have been like to be a backer at like a crazy tier like that. Like,
I can't even imagine what their stretch goals were. That's kind of stunning.
Well, it doesn't matter what it was because it happened in 12 hours,
Right.
Like, is it even a stretch goal at that point, or is it just, oh, I guess we're doing everything?
Yeah, this is our warm-up, I guess.
Yeah, quite honestly. Well,
and they put so much love into the world they've built in it, which is kind of, again, what draws me into it all the time, and why I want to play it again with literally everybody is, they put so much love and crafting and design into everything. Everything from, like, again, like the grittiness and the reality of things, the gravity of, like, the consequences. There's, like, some really, really funny stuff that happens too.
Oh yeah.
And you can just interact with the world in so many different ways. And even, like, there's a couple references to other RPG series and stuff like that. Some references to like Zelda and Final Fantasy, and like in item
that's kinda
descriptions or like in item names. That's kind of a common trope in sort of RPGs, to call back to what you're inspired by. So there's fun little stuff like that goes on. And also one of my favorite things in the entire game, to talk about how gritty and serious this game is, there's a spell called Chicken Form. And
which I can only assume means something.
For the uninitiated, I will explain. Chicken Form turns the enemy that you select into a chicken. I know it's hard to follow, but bear with me here.
Right.
And that is one of, like, I got that spell when I first started the game. And I thought it was just gonna be like a joke thing. It would be funny, just to turn a guy into a chicken and whatnot. I carried that spell with my character the entire playthrough. I never got rid of it. I was using it in the final fight against the final boss, and nothing was more satisfying than turning an endgame boss into a chicken.
You don't simply abandon the chicken spell. The chicken spell becomes a part of you.
Yes, some say that I have become part chicken spell.
You are the chicken master.
And one day I will return its favor, and I will become a chicken.
Great. Well, I hope that works out well for you.
I'm confident.
But speaking of like donating money and paying for things, I actually want to hear you go on and sell this game for us. So this aspect of the show is a little bit of a game, I guess you should say. But considering everything that you've already said about the game, of course, you've been selling it to us this whole time. But the catch here is that I want to hear you do it in 10 words or less. So why should our listeners play this game? Why should I play this game? I know I already own it, but, I want to hear what you have to say. But it has to be 10 words or less. So try to make...
get my fingers out here. I need to count.
Sure, yeah. Count them out if you have to. I have no shame in that. I do it every time. But... try to make it a complete sentence. You don't have to be perfect with your grammar, but my main concern, regardless of what it is if you can get me to play it, get your audience to play it. That's all I want to hear. So take your time and count them on in your fingers if you have to, but it's 10 words or less starting now.
Okay.
That's one. I'm kidding.
So the 10 words or less.
That's
okay.
right.
The single greatest role-playing game I have ever experienced.
I guess that's 10. Yeah, I don't know if role-playing would be 2 words. The single best role-playing game I have ever experienced. Yeah, I guess so. That counts.
I think I did it.
If it doesn't count, then you know what? I don't care. That's good enough, because considering how many games you play, that sells it enough for me.
We'll bring it down one just to bring it a little bit shorter. We'll just say the greatest role-playing game I've ever experienced. That way we have some space. We have some clearance.
There you go. Well, I hope that sums it up well for those of you out there. So, obviously, like you've shared a lot of memories with this game, and considering that you were playing it with your cousin, and overall just like so many things can happen within the game that cause you to either regret your actions or like you may be rewarded in some sense. Like, I guess the important thing to ask here is, like, why do you consider this your favorite? Like, why is this game so important to you? Like, has it made you think differently in any way? Or maybe you learned something new from it in a sense? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if it had the same... And it's kind of funny because I said it was one of my favorite games, if not my favorite game of all time.
Sure.
I think that, not to sound like a hypocrite, but I don't think it had as profound of an effect on me as Dark Souls 3 did, in terms of like shaping the way I approach other video games. But what makes it the greatest game I've ever played in my experience is a lot of things. Firstly, that connection with the game, the fluidity of the encounters, and the characters you meet and the way the characters develop. Having having each character have their own individual connection with the world and the NPCs, and even to some degrees in certain ways, certain playable characters meet NPCs, like the same people, but they have different motivations. For example, there's a there's a character the Red Prince meets to start his journey. He's trying to like basically go into like a dream state. He needs this drug basically to go into this dream state to like see visions of the future, essentially.
Man, the amount of times I've heard that.
Right. I know we've all been there, right? Mondays.
Oh yeah.
But you know, there's a character he has to meet to start that. There's another character whose name is Sabile, who is looking for that same character because she was almost killed by him.
Mm-hmm.
So she's trying to find him to make him pay for what he did to her. He's trying to find him to like start his quest. So if your party's made up of the Red Prince and Sabile, there are certain, like the beginning of the game can be there's some friction there. You know, and there's plenty of other times where that happens. You know, like let's say a character is contracted to kill a certain NPC, but another playable character is, you know, looking for that person to get some major answers about themselves as, you know, as a person. That can happen so often in the game. There's even boss fights, you know, I don't necessarily boss fights, but certain interactions with certain characters you can avoid completely based on who you're playing as, or even just an item you're carrying.
Oh wow.
There's a, and again, not to avoid spoilers as much as possible. In the early game, there's an item you pick up, and it's basically just a body part. And it's like, why would I be able to pick this up? Like, plenty of other characters died, you don't go and pick up body parts. Why is this one here? And it really makes no sense. It shows the person's name of who it is, like who it belonged to, I guess. If you have that in your inventory and you talk to, there's an evil character who's a cannibal. If it's in your inventory when you talk to him, rather than him giving this very poetic, evil sounding speech about how he's gonna, like, you know, kill you and your party and cut you up and whatever, he just says, "You have something I want, give it to me." And he takes this item from you, he gives you a bunch of gold, and he's not hostile.
Okay.
And I did that on accident in like my first playthrough. Like, we were going down, me and my cousin were going through the place, and we saw it and had enough experience in games, and okay, this is a boss battle. This is going to be a major battle in here. It's set up, you know, there's high ground and low ground. This is going to be very interesting. And then I go to talk to him to initiate the combat and see if there's maybe some, you know, persuasion we can do or whatnot. And he's just like, "You have a thing I want, give it to me. That belongs to me." And I was like, okay. And he gave us a bunch of gold that we could have never imagined at that point in the game, and then let us go on our way.
So,
and that was really it. Now, granted, we went back and killed him later when we were leveled up properly, but...
okay.
So, and again, the game also let us do that too, where we were like, oh, he gave us a whole bunch of money that he, you know, when you kill him, he doesn't drop it. So we're like, okay, we got a bunch of money. Now let's get some better weapons and we'll kill this guy because he's a bad person.
Yeah, honestly.
Just that kind of, you know, how many games let you do that, you know? Let you bypass an area completely and bypass an entire really incredibly, like, well thought out and difficult and long fight sequence, and then let you go back and do it anyways.
And you know, there is an example that I like. It is on the tip of my tongue and I cannot think of it right now. But I have seen something like that happen in another game where it's relatively, like, you wouldn't have guessed it. Again, like, you're like, oh, I'm just gonna pick up this random thing, like, and you wouldn't have been able to guess that this would effectively help you go around an entire part of the game. Like, oh yeah, I actually know what it is. I won't say what it is, but it's in Undertale. And
okay.
There's a pretty significant part of the game. Not that the game is long to begin with, but there's a pretty significant part of the game that you can skip if you just hold on to an item near the beginning. And it's funny that something like that has carried over. Like, I don't know, maybe there was some direct influence in that aspect, because, you know, Toby Fox is a huge fan of RPGs, but, you know, that's crazy that, you know, like, it even applies to, like, some elements that are, like, so significant, like, you know, like a really hard boss fight, like, that you can just completely, like, subvert your expectations, and, like, that's it, you're done.
Yeah, it's, you know, that kind of complexity is just like a testament to the writing of the game. I know we touched on it with Dark Souls.
Yeah.
Just to be able to create an experience that is that, I guess the best word I think was modular. Where, you know, you can put 10 different people in a room with the game, and those 10 people can walk out having completely different experiences. And not even just in, you know, oh, did you fight this person, or did you, you know, steal from this person? It's like, you know, meeting certain characters and learning certain things about, you know, the world and what they do.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you know, Ifon has a lot of his story is him kind of going on a redemption journey. Basically, he's, like I said, he's been a bad person. He's done a lot of things that he regrets. And there's also things that he can't remember due to some stuff in his past, which, again, I refuse to spoil. And as he regains his memory of those things, and those are told back to him based on the characters he meets and who knows him from his past, because there's certain people you meet that know you and you don't know them. So you kind of go in confused just the same way he does. Kind of puts that character's perspective directly into, like, the player's shoes. So when someone says, oh, you know, they're all disgusted, say, Ifon, I remember you. You're like, I don't remember you. And that's true, because I haven't played this game before. Who are you? And, you know, they're ashamed of you, or they're super happy to see you, whatever the case may be. And they remind you of the things you've done and who you were. Those certain people might not even get that experience. You know, they might meet Ifon in the first town you go into, and they might just pickpocket him or kill him, you know? And it's like, they don't get to share that experience. Or if you pick him and you say, oh, hey, I went through the whole game, and Ifon's my favorite character, someone who plays the Red Prince, like, you know, I think he's kind of a douchebag. I don't really like Ifon.
Okay. So what you're saying is, moral of the story is, now, like, in reality, you need to carry around more body parts in order to skip confrontation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think the real moral of the story here is Divinity 2 is a collection game where you want to collect as many body parts as possible to skip as much content as possible.
Perfect. All right.
The goal is to get to the end of the game with experiencing as little of the game as possible.
Fantastic. Well, moving on from there.
Right. Perfect. I think we covered it. I think that's great. All right, man. So I'll see you. It's been great.
Yeah, it's a great show. But no, I think for now, I think that's enough about Divinity, at least for this episode. So now we might as well move on to the third and final topic of this episode. Let's move on to talking about sports gaming in general, but more specifically, the Madden series. So, you know, I'll be the first to say that I'm not exactly a sports fan. Like, I'll watch it when the Stanley Cup or the Super Bowl is on, because I like the competitive aspect. I like playing sports and being a part of them. So, like, it's not that I actively dislike them or anything, but ultimately I'd much rather play the sport than watch them. So, like, regardless of all that, though, I like recognize that there's no denying that video games involving sports are a force to be reckoned with. Quite frankly, like, there's not a chance that you didn't at least see like a sliver of gameplay growing up, like whether it might be like from a sibling or from you, like some friends, like you went over their house or something. Like chances are that, like, even all over the world, like yeah, like here we might have football and we have hockey, but like over like in Europe or something, FIFA just dominates it, like the Xbox gaming sphere.
It's massive.
It really is. So, like,
it's so massive.
You know, going into your story, like, why specifically Madden? I mean, I guess we can start there. Like, what made you interested in Madden specifically, or, you know, do you remember how you discovered it?
I want to preface all of this talk about sports games and Madden specifically with the pretense of I am well aware of the state of the Madden series. Right now, it's not fantastic. It does not have a very good reputation. I'm not really talking about, or I don't want to focus on the current state of how those games are made and developed. I want to focus more on my entry to the series and the games I played as a kid. So that's because I know that a lot of people are going to say he's going to talk about Madden as his favorite game of all time, and they're going to look at Madden 22 and they're going to barf.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, I guess I should say you can talk as little bit about it as you want. You can talk about it for the next like hour or so, like as far as I'm concerned, because like, you know, this is all about your experience and hearing what it is you have to say about the series as a whole. You know, so even if a direct sequel may not have been like amazing, like
right,
it's still a part of this like significant portion of gaming history, to be fair. So, you know,
right, and I wanted to touch on that, especially like because the Madden franchise as a whole has done so much for like sports gaming and video gaming in general. But to start with my personal experience with it, the first Madden game that I remember playing was Madden 2003. I remember the cover. I can still see it in my head. Rams running back Marshall Faulk was on the cover. And that game came out when I was 7 years old. And that was something that, it was the first football game I ever really played.
And let me guess, that was back in 2003 by chance?
It comes out, yes. They come out like in 2002.
Yeah.
And they run like it's so weird. Like the game comes out like the year before the year is, and then it's like kind of runs through that year. But
no, you're right.
It's really confusing.
I'm just making a bad joke. That's all it was.
Yeah, no. Madden 04 comes out in 1995.
So really ahead of the game.
Yeah, way ahead of its time. Literally 9 years ahead.
I can't believe they predicted all of all of those
right?
player names.
Who would have thunk, man?
Yeah, seriously.
John Madden's a visionary.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so my experience again is Madden 03 comes out. Marshall Faulk's the cover athlete. It's kind of burned into my head, and I'm a big sports fan, and I grew up in a family that loved sports. So it would make sense to own a sports game. But I didn't really understand football. You know, when you're 7, 8 years old, you don't understand like the complexities of what make the game what it is. Why people who love the game and people who play the game or study it, like you don't know all that stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, Madden was, in a way, on complete accident, it taught me the game of football. It taught me like why you call certain plays, why why certain players are better than others, like why you would, how the game is structured as a whole. I think it wouldn't be an exaggeration. I think other people would also share this opinion with me, or I'd like to think so, that a lot of us wouldn't know anything about football without the help of the Madden franchise.
That's fair. Yeah.
I think that it taught me so much. Because again, with a sport like football, that there's 11 people on each team, and they're all kind of, it looks like they're just running at each other, and it's kill the guy with the ball, basically.
Yeah. Wall of death, but like someone else told you to do it, like
right, and
just like smacking into each other.
There's so much nuance to how the plays get called, and how things are scripted, and why you call a certain defense or a certain offense or run a certain play against a certain team. There's so much in there, and I never understood that. And to help that, I think the way the game was made, John Madden, a legendary coach, recently passed. He is an incredible broadcaster too. When he made the Madden franchise, his goal was to teach people the game of football. He wanted everyone to know about this game that he loved so much.
That's right. Yeah. I think he was the one that said, playing the actual game of football is the best thing ever, and then coaching is second best. So, Yeah,
and he was somebody who was always like a teacher. There was a big documentary did on him around Christmas time this past year about his life and how he's always been a teacher, and Madden taught me football. There's literally, whenever you play the game, It's not so much in the newer games, but I want to say for like the PS2 and Xbox 360 and Xbox original era, there's a button. You can hit square on PlayStation controller. It just says Ask Madden.
Huh.
And it's if you don't know what play to call, if you don't know what the scenario calls for, it gives you a play. And there would always be a little soundbite from John Madden talking about why you should call the play. So if it's just to throw a random football scenario out there, let's say it's third down, there's 2 yards to go, and a run play would be the best one to call. You hit square, it shows you the play, and there'd be some little sound of him like, oh, this run right up the middle, and you can get past defense for a first down here. Now, it doesn't guarantee it's going to happen, but that play sets you up for success more than any other one would. Or at the very least, if you don't use that play, hey, this is probably what I should look at for calling the play for this certain down. And that's how I taught myself, the intricacies of that sport. And to me, as a sports fan, I don't know what my experience would have been without something like that.
Gotcha.
To be completely honest with you, I don't know if I would love sports as much as I do without the video games that I played that taught me those special things.
That's crazy. And I mean, I know for a fact that going outside of what people would normally consider sports, the element of skateboarding especially, that is something that has been a part of my life for a significantly longer period than most people would think. I followed skateboarding for many, many years, and I was an active skateboarder. I still can obviously ride, but the things that I learned playing Tony Hawk games, for example, those are fundamentals that, you could have someone sit down and teach you all these things, but playing rather than doing, I mean, these are tricks that you may never get to do in your life, but getting to experience it firsthand through a video game is honestly magical. You can do this thing that would have taken you years and years and years to perfect, but it's just a whole nother experience getting to have it right then and there.
And I think that bringing up Tony Hawk is an interesting one for me personally. I know we've talked about this at length before. I know you specifically, you're the one who taught me how to ride a skateboard.
That's right.
And we've talked about this at length in the past on our own. Myself, I've always been a fan of the Tony Hawk franchise. And it's part of the reason why I wanted to talk about sports games on a larger scale is because there's so many games that are out there. There's so many different sports that kind of are affected by this and help teach people about, what they're about, really. For example, skateboarding. I've always, like I said, I've been a fan of Tony Hawk. One of my favorite games of all time was Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4.
Yeah.
It's one I thought about talking about here, with you on the podcast. And I've always loved skateboarding culture. Everything from the style of it, the actual intricacies of the tricks and the guys who do that stuff, the music that surrounds skateboarding, the punk rock and skate punk culture has always been a super big draw for me. I wouldn't have known any of that without having played those games first.
Yeah, and it's just so much deeper than people really expect. And the same thing can be said about football too. I don't know, your mom looks at it and you're like, oh, it's just sweaty dudes running into each other. And then
basically
you look at skateboard and it's oh, it's just a bunch of thugs doing tricks on stairs. Who cares? But there's
it's a bunch of people just throwing themselves down the steps a couple times.
Yeah, seriously. Making their hospital bills just rack up.
Right.
Like trading cards, but yeah, there's just so much to it that even someone who had never been into the scene, such as yourself, you had never really stepped on a skateboard until relatively recently. The fact that games can introduce you to a significantly larger world than what you may have initially perceived, that is something that I find super cool. And sports games are definitely a huge part of that movement.
And I think that ties a lot into, how those games have shaped me, overall. again, being a fan of different sports, like playing the games that, where you can play those sports in the video games, whether it's FIFA for soccer or the NHL series, which I'm a massive hockey fan. I love the NHL series.
Yeah.
Madden, NBA, things like that. All those games are, revolve around sports that I didn't really know a lot about until I played those games. And that goes true for all those franchises. Like my family were big into football, but we weren't super big into hockey up until recently, whenever hockey became a lot bigger in my local area. But I learned hockey through the NHL games. I learned the how to call plays and what a power play is, and different things like that, and penalty calls, and honestly, I got into NHL just from looking at watching the game and watching a live game. Like, whoa, you're allowed to punch each other, and they don't get thrown out for that. That's super cool.
Yeah, I do like that about hockey. It's that really like raw element of like watching like these just dudes that have no consideration, like it's just reckless abandon, so to speak. Like, but they're doing it in the name of sportsmanship, Yeah,
and they kind of police themselves in a way.
Yeah,
and that's super interesting because no other sport does that. And each sport has its own. I'm a bigger fan of football and hockey, so I guess I'll gravitate towards those two.
Yeah,
and focus on those
fine.
Two.
You can talk about like any of the sports games that like you had in mind. Like just throwing it out there. I don't want to limit you to like one or two games specifically.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think the biggest ones outside of the Madden franchise, because I think that's the one that started all of this, and the one that I think has the largest carryover out of any of them.
Of course,
like Madden football is something that transcends the sport. It transcends like the game series. It transcends the guy whose namesake it is. There are kids. There's someone somewhere who probably has no idea who the hell John Madden is. There's people who don't even realize that he was a coach, and he's one of the greatest NFL coaches of all time.
Yeah, and
all they know is that he's the guy he's named after Madden football.
And in a way, that's almost like a generational thing, Like you have your people that are, like our moms and dads that are watching football and all these other sports like being carried out like on the screen, but we're in an age where video games are like a huge like force for entertainment, and some of us may have only ever heard of John Madden because of the Madden series of video games. So, there you have it. Like that, in a way, it helps like bridge that generational gap because there's relevant things for every person out there at this point, really.
And it becomes such a teaching experience. And I think that's one of the things that in the 21st century, like especially with sports games, I think in all contexts, has really shifted the focus. There's a lot of learning that can be done even through the medium of a video game. One of the other big sports games in my life was the Gran Turismo series.
Yeah.
My dad, he's always been a big racing fan. He's always been a car guy. He raced go-karts for the longest time, and we would play Gran Turismo together. Like that was one of the first games I ever played, was Gran Turismo 3 with my dad.
And let me just throw this out there. Banging soundtrack. Like on like most of these games, especially like the PS2 era, just like without a doubt one of the more influential ones, like in my mind, per se.
The menu music to Gran Turismo 4 is such a masterpiece for no reason. And I want to file a complaint because that music is so good, I don't even want to play the game.
It had no reason.
All I want to do...
It had no business being this good. Like
all I want to do is race some fast cars and have a good time. But thanks to the beautiful minds that wrote that music, all I want to do is sit in the menus now. This is not fair.
You effectively made this game run backwards by you didn't stop to think if you should. You only thought about if you could.
Exactly. There it is.
I guess more or less.
And those, for me, that series, the Gran Turismo series, taught me about like auto racing. And my dad was also a big NASCAR fan too, growing up. And so I learned a lot about how that entire sport goes and how much depth there is to auto racing. And not just, put a fast car out there and run around until it either dies or wins. There's so much more that goes into it. And, more hardcore, realistic simulation type games that, gravitate around that. I remember the Forza series, after about Forza 3 and Forza 4, they got to be a lot more intricate with like car design in terms of not only just how they look and how they feel, but you could adjust so many things. You could change like the wheel spacing, you could change like the axles, and change all the little intricacies that you could actually do on a car if you had the parts and the team for it. But now you can do this all digitally. You can feel how that makes a difference.
And that's a good word that you said earlier. You mentioned simulation, because a lot of this podcast has been spent talking about like how immersive a game series can be, but I feel like immersion and actual like suspension of disbelief, like this ability to simulate what is a real life concept so well within a video game, that is something that sports video games, I mean, that's literally what they're built off of. Like, that's their foundation. So
yeah, I think one of the things that, and it achieves the same goal, which is kind of fascinating, is I think a lot of us, at some point, whether it's currently or at some point in our lives, like video games can be an escape. Video games can be, us going into an alternate universe.
That's right.
To, kind of go into a different place. And playing a game like if you're playing a football game, well, it's 11 humans against 11 humans playing a game that you are going to see on TV on Sunday. That's not really an escape from anything, in a basic sense, but in a way, it's like you're in control of the experience.
That's right.
And it achieves that same sort of escape based on, like how you interact with that game. And I think that's one of the really awesome things about simulation gaming too, and it also has that real world extrapolation. Like, for example, with Gran Turismo, one of the really neat things about that franchise is it was touted as like a hardcore, very bare bones racing simulator.
Mm-hmm.
Now you could play it in an arcade sense, but it can also get very difficult, and you can play it on a very competitive level. And there was a time, I wish I could remember the year offhand, but there was a Gran Turismo like racing contest, and the winners, they went to the Le Mans racing series in real life, and they won an actual race.
Oh wow!
And
I didn't know about that. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's something really incredible. I think it was the Gran Turismo Sport trailer for, I was like 2016 or 17 when GT Sport came out. They talk about the game series being like kind of talked down on by the racing community, and they said we couldn't be anything, but then we filled the podium at Le Mans.
Right.
And it shows a clip of like the guys getting on the podium and like actually placing in a respectable way.
Wow.
And now there's, they have, and in all sports, there's national and worldwide tournaments, and, these people from all over the world are playing against each other to compete for incredible cash prizes.
Yeah. And that's another conversation to be had. Like, just like not only is it like replicating this like this realistic perspective on like video gaming, like you're literally taking something from reality and putting it into this like virtual environment. Like, for one thing, it's fueling that, that innate feeling that like every person has, where it's like, man, I wish I knew what it was like to do this thing, like this X, Y, and Z. Like, I want to know what it's like to drive a LaFerrari. Like, I want to know how, like what it would be like to control the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, that's something that like these kind of games, they absolutely feed into. And then whenever you see like the real world applications for these kind of things, like a lot of people, even in the age of like esports and stuff, they still undermine the amount of just like influence that these games have on reality. Like, I could be wrong about this, but I feel like there's been people that have gotten jobs as like, you know, like college football coaches or even just like, you know, like whatever, like high school coach or whatever, just because they are so good at they're so good at Madden. Like it's happened before, and I'm sure that like now like it's becoming more and more relevant, and like I guess prevalent is a better word for it, but it's just crazy to think about, really. Like it, like life imitates art, and then like vice versa, you know.
You're absolutely right on that, man. And I think that that's something that, you know, looping back to football, is kind of happening right now even. A lot of coaches that are really successful, you know, a lot of times, you know, in a more traditional sense, the coach was someone who was very smart, and they always are. You know, obviously, you can't be a coach for very long and be dumb, but usually it was somebody who was like established, an older guy, who'd been around the game for a long time and just had been around the league. But nowadays, you're seeing coaches getting younger and younger, and they're not just, you know, some guy who went to Harvard and studied football, you know, from a textbook. You know, the Super Bowl played out a couple weeks ago, you know, right now. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the winning coach, his name is Sean McVay. He's 36 years old.
And that's young for the demographic, I guess.
I don't know if he's the youngest, but he's one of the youngest coaches to ever win a Super Bowl. And you know, a lot of people were talking about how he's like he makes incredible play designs, and his playbook is incredible, and he's a genius. And how'd he, you know, design plays so well when he's so young? How's he so far ahead of his time? And a lot of people, and I've been reading this a lot lately, it's kind of circulating a bit, is a lot of players and now coaches that are entering into, you know, like the pro level, they all grew up playing Madden.
Right.
You know, the starting quarterbacks in the NFL right now, they're in there anywhere from their mid-20s to their mid to late 30s. So they all have been a teenager or a child, or, you know, playing Madden.
Yeah.
And that teaches you, you know, play design and, you know, how to play a certain position. You can lock as a quarterback. You can only play as a running back or a wide receiver. You can just play as the coach and just simulate a game even. So when people say Sean McVay is an incredible play caller, well, you got to think he's probably been calling NFL football plays since he was probably 10 years old.
Yeah. The guy, when you put it that way, you know, it makes sense.
Yeah, the guy has, you know, 20 years of play calling experience, and, you know, since he was 11, he's known what a playbook looked like. And I have a similar experience with that. Obviously, I'm not a coach by any means, but, you know, I was explaining to somebody the other day when I was talking about doing this podcast with you and what I was going to be discussing to try to like get my memory jogged for it. Mm-hmm. And we were just talking about different football concepts, because one of my coworkers and I that I was talking with, we talk sports all the time, and he's very intelligent with it, and he knows a lot about sports. So we have like very long conversations with it. And these concepts might not mean anything right now, but it's like there's certain football concepts that I would know nothing about if not for Madden. Like, I would not know what cover 3 coverage means. I wouldn't know what a robber zone was, or, you know, a play action.
Yeah.
Those words mean nothing without...
I mean, I can tell you I have no idea what the hell that is, but, you know,
right.
Like, to further solidify your point.
Right, and I don't have a perfect understanding of that either, to be completely honest, but, you know, if when someone says, oh, like, it's an engage 8, I know that, okay, they're blitzing 8 people. And what's a blitz? Oh, they're going after the quarterback. They're just going to run straight for the quarterback. Like, all those things I learned because I played Madden.
Right.
And I was calling plays in Madden. And so to see younger coaches being really successful and younger players being really successful, doing really interesting stuff that might not go along with traditional sports convention. And this is happening across all sports. You know, like there are kids growing up trying to do crazy, you know, trick shots and doing incredible dribble moves in soccer or basketball, or trying to make one-handed catches in football.
Yeah, of course.
Why would they want to do that? Well, they saw it in Madden.
And like, I mean, let's face it, like, there's nothing wrong with being an old head. Like, there's nothing wrong with just, like, bearing into tradition, because that's what's worked for the past however many decades. But, like, when you see, like, the amount of, like, potential that these, like, new players have and, like, these new coaches, like, it almost turns into, like, a whole new game at that point, because you're having such a unique perspective on what was, in a sense, like, could be considered like a traditional aspect, like, of this entire sport. Like, in a way, it's almost like an art form. You're taking something like this playbook that's been written the same way for the past, like, 30 years, and then you're taking it and building upon its foundation, but you're still bringing this element that, like, has not been brought to it before. And I think that aspect, is just, like, that's what sports need. They need that, like, refreshing kind of take. They need that experience, because, I mean, some people might be fine with seeing the same thing over and over, but, for younger guys like you and I, like, seeing something new happen, like, that's like the coolest thing ever, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, it's something that I think is really awesome to see, and it puts like the regular kid, like, in the shoes of who they see on screen. I think a lot of guys in football right now, like, there's, like, Patrick Mahomes, who's a quarterback for the Chiefs, and Lamar Jackson, quarterback for the Ravens. They're you're my age. They're 25, 26, 27 years old.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And they really, like, they all grow up and they talk about playing Madden when they grow up. They, I selected the, I was playing as the Falcons and I wanted to be, this guy. I wanted to be, I played the Steelers and I want to be this player. I've always looked up to this guy. And they can go on their system and go play as that guy.
Yeah.
And learn exactly how he played and see how fast he was. And, what makes him different? Well, he's got, the receiver is great because he can catch anything. Okay, I got to be a great receiver. So I got to learn how he plays, and then it inspires them to go learn about, like, every other thing about the sport to make them better. And it puts them on a trajectory to really do great things.
And it's honestly, like, amazing, like, how much of a difference, like things like that can make. But moving on from that topic, well, I guess I should ask you, are there any other games that you want to talk about, like any other sports, like, before we move on?
There is one interesting one that I do want to mention. There's a sport that I haven't really talked about yet.
Okay.
It is baseball. I could get into it more so, but for my own personal sake, I'm not a big baseball fan.
Sure.
The sport does not do much for me. It's not very interesting. I know some people would disagree with that. I know a couple people in my friend group that are going to hate me for saying that, but I refuse to change my opinion.
A few of them came to mind in my head, but
yeah, a few of them came to mind. They can fight me on it. They know where I'm at. Like, come get me. But that's
when you say, you know what? It's just not for me. It's not bad.
It's just not for me.
It's just not for me. That's what it is.
It's not bad.
Every reviewer ever officially is off the hook now because of that. So
yeah, exactly. I'm completely scot-free now. But baseball is not one of my preferred sports. I'm not a big fan of it. But one sports game that I did play, it is a baseball game. It's called Super Mega Baseball. It's very arcadey.
You just made, like, 3 people jump up in their seat, like, oh yeah, like, Super Mega Baseball.
I do it for those 3 people. Those are the 3 people that are the most important in my life. Really. I don't even know who they are, but I'm with you. When my friends come find me that are angry with me about this, you come find me and back me up.
Yeah, you come back airing up.
We'll duke it out. Nah, I don't want to fight anybody. Yeah. But Super Mega Baseball it's set up like an arcadey game, and you can adjust the difficulty to make it, like, harder based on whatever, settings you'd like. If base running's too easy, you can make it more difficult. You can make the pitching harder. It's kind of customizable in that regard. But the one thing that is so interesting is I love this game. Like, I love the strategy of baseball. And it's taught me a lot about like how pitchers pitch, how batters bat, how, you would set up a pitching rotation, and how you would play certain players in certain places. But I cannot for the life of me bring myself to watch a game of baseball because it is so damn boring.
I mean, I've been to 2 baseball games in my life, and I think I remember the snacks more than I remember the actual game. And maybe that's just a flat out diss, or maybe I'm just too obsessed with food. But you know what? That's my experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to 1 baseball game, and honestly, I got there in the 2nd inning. We were already down 2-0.
Oh no!
I left in the middle of the 7th. We were down 9-0. I left.
Oh man!
I was like, "This is not for me."
Let me guess.
And then
Let me guess. Pittsburgh Pirates.
Mm-hmm. It was against the Milwaukee Brewers. And I left.
Good times.
When I talked to a friend of mine that likes baseball, and I told him I left in the 7th inning, he goes, "Oh, you didn't even." I can't remember what player was on the Brewers at the time, but there was some guy who was like an all-star player. And he was like, "You didn't even stay to watch, so-and-so?" And I'm like, "No. I came here to watch the team I'm rooting for win a baseball game."
Yeah.
He's like, "Well, at least like you get to have a day out in the sun. I'm like, I could do that for free at the park 5 minutes down the road."
Yeah. I want to see bat hit ball. I cannot do that outside of PNC Park. Like,
if I wanted to leave my house and be disappointed, I'd go to work,
Except there's no sunlight.
Yeah, if I wanted to go just sit somewhere and be upset and uncomfortable, I'd go sit in the sun, and just do nothing. Because I would have gotten a better experience doing nothing.
Just photosynthesizing.
I wouldn't have had to deal with downtown traffic if I had stayed home and done nothing.
That too.
But the thing is that's really amazing is Super Mega Baseball is an incredibly interesting and well-made game. And I really love it. And I play it a lot just because it's just so easy to pick up and play. Like, the games are relatively quick, so it goes pretty fast, which is one of the things I don't like about real baseball.
Yeah.
And it has caused this existential crisis in my head of I don't know if I like baseball or not. Because I really like Super Mega Baseball, and I like baseball on paper, but I don't like watching real people go play real baseball. Which I guess kind of loops back to what we were saying about sports games in general, about them kind of having an impact beyond just the sport themselves.
Yeah, and you know what could be said? I mean, we've talked about like a lot of these sport games being simulations of whatever it is that you're playing. Like, it might even be fair to say that Super Mega Baseball is not like a super accurate simulation of actual baseball, because like if you want to play like actual baseball, you play like MLB. But
right.
Super Mega Baseball, I feel like, has its own spin on the game where, I mean, you could say it much better than I could, but I feel like it's its own thing outside of whatever it is you're doing, like in MLB, so to speak.
Yeah, I think all the characters look very arcadey. They're all kind of big caricatures.
Okay, I see.
And a lot of the names that the computer generates for people, they're really funny. They're either like little double entente, or they have them like kind of double meaning, or some little innuendos.
Yeah. That's funny.
So it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny to see someone whose name is like Dave Porkchop hit a ball 500 yards. And it's like, oh, that's Dave Porkchop's 500th, hit of the season. It's like, what the hell? How did he do that? That's not possible. No one could hit a baseball 550 feet. And it's like,
if Dave Porkchop can do it, then you can too, Aaron.
I mean, I guess so. I guess I just gotta, I gotta get on a more aggressive fitness routine.
Yeah, really bulk up this time. No screwing around.
Yeah, so that way I can be, maybe I would like baseball more if I was good at it.
I mean,
maybe that's what it boils down to.
Maybe. I mean, how often have you played baseball in reality?
I played for 2 years when I was a kid.
Oh, so you like actually played? Okay.
Yeah, I got hit by more pitches than I hit with the bat.
Okay.
So I stopped playing. Fun little anecdote about that. My last 3 games that I played in youth baseball, I was hit by a pitch 5 times.
Yikes.
And the other at bats that I had, I struck out.
I mean, that's kind of their fault, though. You know, like you're not supposed to hit the batter, but
and my very last game, I got hit in the second inning, and I got hit in the shoulder, and it hurt, and I cried, and I went to first base sobbing.
Ugh.
But everyone's cheering me on. Way to go, Aaron! Good hit.
Of course,
you did great. And then like a couple innings later, we're losing. We were not a winning team by any means. We're all 11 years old.
Right.
No, we were even before that. Probably I was like 9. But anyways, so it's like the 5th or 6th inning, and I get hit with a pitch again, even harder, and it hurts even more.
Ugh.
And I go off, and I want to go take my base, but it hurts too much. I'm crying. I just go into the dugout. Someone else takes my base for me. In the dugout, I start taking off my helmet. I start taking off my baseball shirt, my baseball pants. And the coach's like, "What are you doing?" And I looked at him, and I said, "I'm going home." And he's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "I don't want to play baseball anymore." And I walked up into the stands with no shirt on, and I said, "Dad, I don't want to play baseball anymore." And he goes, "I'm not making you play baseball. I hate this sport. Let's go home."
Oh, man.
And the best part about that baseball season was the ice cream I got after I left that game on my own terms.
Man, what a bold stance as an 11-year-old, you know?
I know. I really stuck it to youth baseball.
I mean, that's that's like me when I was when I think I was in elementary school still, and we had to like pick an instrument to learn, and I chose trumpet, and you know, it only took me like a couple of months to realize, man, playing trumpet just fucking sucks. Like I'm sure there's like one of my best friends has like, he's really good at trumpet, but like it made me more mad than anything at the time. And like when you're a little kid, not a lot of things really bother you, but like that was definitely one of those things. And
man, that trumpet said some shit to you.
It wasn't even that. It was just like I kind of pulled a U, so to speak. I wasn't halfway through the middle of a lesson, and it was just like the teacher was explaining some concept, and then, you know, I think I like had a question about it or something, and then like the way that he answered it, it did not make any sense, and I was like, can you explain that in a different way? And he's like, I mean, no, that's just how you do it. And I'm like, you know what, screw this. And then I put my trumpet back in my case and I left. I don't even know if I took my trumpet with me, to be completely honest. I might have left it in the room.
Oh, jeez.
But like,
what an expensive leave.
But even if I did or didn't, I was still just like, ever since then, I'm like, no, thank you. Like, leave me out of it. So, like anything involving trumpets, just leave me out of it.
Yeah, and I think the funny thing for me when I quit baseball was I talked to my dad almost like I was like getting out of a contract. Like I felt so disappointed, you know, and I was like, "Dad, I don't want to play baseball anymore. I'm sorry." And he was like, "Aaron, I hate baseball. I don't care if you don't play baseball anymore."
So what? Like, so why was he doing it then? Was he just like, "Oh, my boy needs to play a sport. I need to."
Well, I wanted to play because my older brother was playing.
Oh, right.
And my friends were playing. So I was like, I should play, I'm like, you know, boys like me play baseball. And then I was like, no, I hate baseball. And it was funny, like, for me, I did the same thing with, like, youth football, where I was like, oh, my brother's playing football. I want to play football. And I loved the sport, so I started to play. But for anyone who knows me in real life, I'm not a big person. I'm like 5'6". So, you know, and I was very small as a kid, and I hit my growth spurt relatively late, and I didn't really get a big one. So, I never really got to be like the tall, built, athletic kid when I was in high school. So,
I mean, I'm in like a similar vein. Like I'm average height, but I played basketball growing up, and I actually really enjoyed it. But like, I was never known for doing layups or anything like that. I was always the guy that was shooting 3-pointers, even though I'm not like supposed to. I don't know. Like the coach always tells you to go for the safest option, but I was always shooting 3-pointers because that's what's fun. And like, I got known as the kid who would always go for them, and then sometimes they would make it, and then everyone would go nuts. But like, you know,
other times
I was not built for the sport necessarily, but
yeah,
it was still a lot of fun.
I remember growing up and like, 'cause I kind of liked to study football and like sports in general,
Yeah.
especially like hockey and football. So I knew a lot about football and like why we were doing certain things and running certain plays. But I also remember growing up, one time we lined up from tallest to shortest on the team, and I was second from the end on the short end. And so I was just really undersized. No matter how much I wanted to play and wanted to be good and really liked playing with like my brother and my friends, and I just wasn't a big guy. And I quit football for that exact reason, because I was just like, man, like these kids are getting really big and I'm really not.
Yeah, you're gonna get flattened one day or another.
Yeah, and I did.
Oh,
and
no.
I sure did. I had my fair share of bruises and concussions and all the fun stuff that comes with youth football.
Yeah. Ugh. I mean, that's one thing I'm happy about. I never had to suffer a concussion. Like the most I did was, the thing that I got the most serious about, like I played soccer as a kid, but like I did track and field in high school, and at that point you have to try pretty hard to get a concussion in track and field. So
yeah,
like
that's true. There's really not. It's not a contact sport.
No, not at all. Unless you contact your head with the high jump bar, which I've seen happen, but that's really about it.
And I think that's part of the beauty of what we talk about simulation games is that you can
going back to video games finally.
Yeah, because I kind of thought of it when you said it, is like you can experience all of that like through the lens of a simulation game.
Yeah,
like. If all you want to do is shoot 3-pointers because that's what you like to do, you can build a team in an NBA game that only shoots 3-pointers.
That's true.
And just see what that would be like to play on a professional level.
Yeah, and you can coach a team and tell everyone else to hit each other instead of getting concussions yourself. It's
right.
foolproof.
You can go send some virtual man in your stead with your name on his jersey into a pile of other people who are just as big and have him get a concussion for you.
Yeah, honestly. Oh, that's funny.
That's one of the, and I guess that's what makes Madden football so special.
Perfect. Well, I mean, based on what I've been hearing, Aaron, it seems like you know your stuff. Like, whether it's Madden, whether it's sports games, I mean, I think you know what's coming up here. I think I'd like to get us started on some trivia.
Okay.
If you don't mind. So
I certainly don't.
I'd like to go ahead and, let's just go ahead and jump right into this one. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm
Too
ready
bad.
for it,
I'm going to do it anyways. So
outstanding work.
So obviously, here's your question. Obviously, EA has a stranglehold on pretty much every major sports series out there. Like you've got your football, NHL, FIFA, UFC, but the EA
stranglehold is the right word.
Yeah, honestly, but the EA Sports division has been around for as long as 1991, and so because you're a fan of the podcast, I want to make things a little different for you. So normally we have multiple choice options on the show, but this time I'm going to narrow it down and only give you 2 options to choose from. So all you're going to have to tell me is yes or no to the following question. So I want to know if have any of the following sports not been under the EA Sports moniker? So,
okay.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and list them here. So there's cricket, rugby, NASCAR, tennis, snowboarding. So out of all of these sports, do any of them stand out as being not a part of the EA Sports series? So, yes or no?
Oh.
So I should say, if you think that any of these games stand out, then you would say yes, there's one that is not a part of the EA Sports series. But if you think that they're all okay, then you would say no, they're all good. Like they're all under the moniker. So.
That's really tricky.
Yeah, so I can repeat them for you if you need me to.
Yeah, if you could, actually.
Sure. So there's cricket, rugby, NASCAR, tennis, snowboarding.
So going from the ones that I know, NASCAR absolutely is an EA Sports game. I've owned a ton of them.
Okay.
Rugby, I know that there's been a couple of rugby series from time to time, and I feel like EA's made at least one. Snowboarding is tricky for me because I know that EA used to own EA Big, and I'm not sure if that counts as EA Sports or not. I think it does. So, and then tennis and cricket. There has to be at least one tennis game made by EA. And cricket, I gotta say they're all covered. I gotta say EA's made at least one of all of those games.
So you're locking in that the answer is no, that there's no games that stand out?
I'm taking a bit of a leap of faith here, but yeah, I'm saying none of them stand out as games that EA Sports hasn't covered.
Gotcha. Well, Aaron, I am so glad that you chose that answer. The correct answer is no, that all of these sports have had some sort of representation in the EA Sports lineage. So
that's actually kind of amazing.
It really is, honestly. And if you saw the list that I was sifting through to get these, you would understand. But let me give you some context here. So, cricket is one of the earliest represented sports in this line, running from 1996 until 2006 on the PS2. And rugby, along with the Australian Rugby League and the AFL, were all a part of EA Sports. And as you mentioned, NASCAR was a part of EA Sports for over a decade, actually, from 1997 to 2008. And you owned a lot of them, so you definitely knew that one. And as for tennis and snowboarding, EA published the Grand Slam Tennis series and the SSX series for snowboarding.
I forgot I forgot Grand Slam was EA. That was the series I was thinking about. I couldn't remember who made it.
And it has that that has that box art like that. If you saw it, you'd be like, "Oh, that's an EA game." Absolutely.
Oh, of course. And snowboarding I knew was EA Big. I forgot it was EA Sports Big because that was I kind of funny I said it was tricky because that's the second game of the series, SSX Tricky. That's really amazing to think about.
So overall, considering all of those sports, even though tennis and snowboarding, they had their games, but, even though it was small, it still makes each and every one of these a significant part of the EA Sports title. So well done. I applaud you on that.
That's just more of a testament to what EA did in the early 2000s and late 90s, I think.
Yeah, and at that point, you would have been exposed to all of it, so... at least in some capacity, like whether it's YouTube or you saw someone else play it. I was thinking about throwing in lacrosse, but I don't know. I felt like that would have been too obvious, for that exact point. Like maybe you would have seen gameplay or something by now,
Yeah, I think that there's a couple lacrosse games out there. I know in the 2013, 2014, there was a couple different companies that were trying to make lacrosse because that was kind of when it was on the rise.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that probably would have been a bit of a giveaway, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was that kind of stumped me a second there.
Good.
I really had to roll back through the mental Rolodex and think, okay, what have they made?
Yeah. And that's the goal of this show is we don't want to make it too hard for you, but we want to test your knowledge and see if you really do know your stuff. So and in this case you do. So congrats on that.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, I think we already talked about why the game is so important and how it's made you feel in relation to just a real life aspect. So, at that point we might as well move on to the gaming news portion. What do you think?
I think that's great.
All right. Well,
that'd be great.
Well, let's go ahead and do that then. So, here is the start of the news segment of the podcast where we pretty much just dive into, what's been happening nowadays related to these series. Obviously, some series may be older than others, but that's not to say that the developers aren't up to new things, whether it might be new titles entirely or there's rumors or something. Either way, let's go ahead and dive into it, starting with the first series that we talked about, which is Dark Souls. And, I'm sure the obvious bit of news to talk about right now is a little thing you guys might have heard being talked about. A little game I like to call Elden Ring. And as a matter of fact, we are actually recording the episode on the release date of Elden Ring, which is February 25th, for those unaware.
Happy Elden Ring Day, everybody.
Yeah, woo! But, it's, as far as I'm aware, it's been released on new-gen consoles as well as PC, and the previous generation, like PS4 and Xbox One, so, people like you and I still have the opportunity to experience it. Unlike the Demon Souls remake that was released back in 2020, that was PS5 exclusive, or the new generations. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's hard to believe it's almost been a year and a half since the ninth generation of consoles has launched. Like, you still don't see them on store shelves. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I really wanted to do myself whenever the PS5 was. I really want to get my hands on a PS5.
Yeah. I honestly forgot. I always forget about the other one, the Xbox. Like, I don't know a single person that owns it, so
frankly, neither do I.
Yeah.
But I think the PS5 is one of those things when I was like, oh, I can't wait to get my hands on it, and that's literally all of us right now. We're all just like, I can't wait to get my hands on it. Still,
that'll be me when my PS4 breaks, but fingers crossed. Like, I'll still be good for a while.
Yeah, it's gonna be a sad day when I retire my PS4.
Yeah, seriously.
I think I bought it refurbished off of eBay for like $140 in like 2015.
Oh wow!
And it has given me so much life.
Well, you got lucky then, because refurbished is a gamble,
Yeah, I guess the guy who I bought it from, he had some issue with it, and he took it apart, put it back together, and he said it was running like new, and I'm like, you know what? Okay.
Fixed it himself kind of thing.
I'm like, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to trust that this guy took this thing apart and put it back together properly, and you would have no idea.
Wow.
And it's given me what? Almost 7 years of good service.
Yeah,
so.
That's impressive. I mean, I've had my PS4 Pro ever since Kingdom Hearts 3 launched back in the beginning of 2019, so I judging by how long your machine's been going on for, hopefully I can get that kind of mileage out of it. But I'm prepared for the worst. I've already had to wipe my data once. Luckily, I had a PlayStation Plus, so all my save data was back up. But I lost all my recordings, my screenshots. It really sucked. But regardless of console talk, I'm sure you know a lot about Elden Ring, or maybe you don't. Maybe you've been trying to go in blind.
I have, when it comes to Elden Ring, I have taken the stance of I'm going to bury my head in the sand as far as possible and avoid as much of this game as much as I can until I get to play it myself.
That's probably a good idea.
From what I do know and the things I looked at before the release, there's so much content in this game that is really groundbreaking for Souls series players like myself.
Yeah.
The fact that it's open world. It's a true open world. Mounted combat is a thing in this game, which is brand new to the Souls series.
Huh.
Cooperation is also, and it's always been a part of the Souls series, but they're kind of bringing that into the forefront of this again as well.
There used to be PvP, I think, right?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure they're preserving that PvP element of things as well as the cooperation, and I think they're also promoting the cooperation a little more, so you can actually help each other out.
I see.
I guess I don't know how much that's fleshed out since release, but I'm hoping that it's nothing but good things. And beyond that, just the game looks so beautiful.
Of course,
it just looks so good.
And so, for context, why aren't you playing it? Considering how big of a Dark Souls fan you are.
Strictly because right now the PC that I have, if I tried to play it on there, it would turn into a brick.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do myself the disservice of playing it on a PS4 port.
I see.
So I am saving up all of my energy and finances to get myself a new PC so I can play it the way the Elden Ring Dark Souls gods intended me to play it. which
Sure.
is in stunning 4K at 60 frames. So I'm waiting until, and again, this is like, we're at like day 0 right now, basically with the game. So hoping that, once, the bugs come out and it stabilizes, like it's, by the time I get to it, it's like a perfectly polished game.
That would be nice. Yeah. I mean, at the same time, I will not judge you or be surprised if you do decide to pick it up on PS4 because, there's bound to be information out there. And, many people try to say, like, don't do spoilers, but, so if your PC didn't make an oopsie whoopsie, then we wouldn't be in this situation. But, hopefully you get to experience it soon for your sake. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it.
But what I actually didn't realize, like, through my research is that even though From Software is developing it, it supposedly has no relation to Dark Souls whatsoever outside of gameplay. Like, it's not a sequel, nor a prequel or even a spin-off. So, like, that much is surprising to me. But then again, they've been developing games like Sekiro and Nioh that, like, they stand out just as much as any other game. So
yeah,
like,
it's something that they like to do. I mean, whenever they made the Ringed City DLC, one of the things that, I don't know if it was Miyazaki himself or just like the Dark Souls, From Software team in general, but they did state that, hey, Ringed City DLC is going to be the last bit of new information we release for Dark Souls 3. And it'll be the last thing we do for Dark Souls. And so everyone was kind of like, oh, well, great, I guess we're never going to see this thing ever again. So that's why when Elden Ring came out, all of us collectively, lost our minds.
Yeah.
Because we're like, oh, it's coming back, and it's not the same thing. And I think if it was any other game series, we'd be upset. If it was any other type of game where, like, if Legend of Zelda came out, if the teams behind that came out and they were like, we're making, a Legend of, a random NPC, and it's like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
If they were just like, the Legend of King of Red Lions. It's like,
following a story of him instead, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yikes, man. I don't know if I'd be able to get behind this.
I see what you're saying.
But I think with the success of Bloodborne, the success of, I think Dark Souls as a whole being from Demon Souls, and also Sekiro being a phenomenal game, I think that all of us collectively as fans of the Soulsborne franchise are really excited to see something brand new.
Yeah, honestly. And I mean, like, for the record, it seems like it's still going to include similar concepts. So, stuff like picking your class and leveling it up as the game goes on. And, there will still be elements of online play and possibly some PvP as well. So, that much is solidified. But What I want to know is I'm curious what this means for newcomers as well as, like, the veteran fans such as yourself, because, the consensus is that veteran gamers will probably be happy with the release, but, there's not to say that there isn't a possibility of, like, changes that could be made that, like, really make some waves within the gameplay. And so, like, the people that are being introduced to the franchise, like, they might not have a problem with it, but
yeah,
I don't know. Like, I'm sure someone listening to this right now, like, is like, no, you're fine, don't worry about it. But, like, we have no idea, like, because we haven't experienced it yet.
Yeah, I think the one thing that Elden Ring is going to really do well, the one thing that I hope that this game does let me try it again. The one thing I think that Elden Ring is going to do for a lot of newcomers is being this incredibly highly touted, release from this, powerhouse developer that backs these powerhouse series, is going to draw a lot of new people in. So, you don't have to feel like, oh, I have to know all the Dark Souls lore to get what's going on in Elden Ring. And in a way that makes it, the fact that it's not connected to those other titles, really special. And it makes it almost a little more accessible. Because there's not some, like I mentioned before, just like the overwhelming amount of lore that goes into Dark Souls 3. I mean, my God, like, all those games, the item descriptions are where the story gets told. And I don't know about you, but I don't really go around reading item descriptions a lot in my video games that I play. Unless, of course, it's Dark Souls. And Divinity, too. Not. Divinity does the same thing as well. So, somebody who doesn't really know the Soulsborne games or doesn't really, frankly, care about the Dark Souls universe, they can pick up a copy of Elden Ring and get a fresh experience and enjoy it just as much as someone who's like an absolute like lifer in that series.
Oh, for sure.
So I'm very, very excited for it.
I mean, I wish I could give more input than other than, I think people will enjoy it because, I need to experience more of that like Dark Souls gameplay for myself. And I mean, who knows? Like if I did jump back into it now, like maybe I might even pick up Elden Ring. Who knows? Like that could be something that I invest some time in if I'm willing to be patient with it, because maybe that's what it was. Maybe I wasn't being patient enough with the gameplay process because it can take a toll on you if you're not careful.
Yeah, man, it can definitely, taking a toll is definitely the right way to put it.
Right.
It can be a trip. It can be incredibly frustrating, but it's just part of the process. It's so worth it.
Gotcha.
I love every second of it.
Well, speaking of significant changes, we've already established that you're definitely a D&D fan, so you might be happy to hear that the next piece of news, the fact that Dark Souls is next in line to get a tabletop RPG game.
Really?
Yeah, it was announced about a month ago, and the book that's being released is based off of D&D 5e, but it actually changes a number of things to make the gameplay more unique and I guess Dark Souls-esque, so to speak. So, it's still 5th edition, but there's a good chance that it's not the 5th edition that you're familiar with, but rather a whole new experience. So, what do you think on that? I
mean, I think that anything that can incorporate 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is great for, first of all, D&D, because I think everybody should play it. I think it's super fun. And just overall, like, just that RPG style that I think a lot of games, inspire themselves from Dungeons and Dragons. I wouldn't be stunned if there was, a D&D fan in every major gaming studio.
Yeah, that is honestly a fair thing to assume. Because I mean, it's spanned generations. Like you've got all sorts of people playing D&D, like young and old.
And again, that's we could go on for days about that.
Right.
My God, there's so much. I mean, D&D's been around for, I think, going on like 40 or 50 years now.
Well, why don't I go ahead and fill you in on some of the changes that have been revealed then? So, and again, this is not everything that is being introduced into the game. They want to keep some element of the whole experience a surprise. And likewise, this also does not mean that absolutely everything is going to be changed. So, you're still going to have a unique experience, but it's still going to play like D&D, just maybe not the exact same way you remember, So, so the first major change, and this is arguably the biggest one, is the introduction of something called position. And so, in Dark Souls, you have your health and you have your stamina. Obviously, health is how much damage you can take, and stamina is how many actions you can perform.
Right.
Like on the roughest way to explain it, But 5th edition doesn't really have anything resembling stamina, and it would be a headache to keep track of all of it. So, this is where position comes into play. And quoting the Steamforged website itself, position measures your health, but it's also a resource you can spend to tweak a dice roll or use special abilities gained from your character, class, or equipment. Position goes up gradually as you increase in level, but it's always finite and generated randomly at the start of a battle. So using it allows you to do some pretty amazing stuff, but it also makes you more vulnerable. So,
that's really interesting.
So, I mean, to me, it seems like you have to balance your decisions to use position or not, because it can really come back to bite you when you're not expecting it. Because, and this is the second major rule change, there are no death saves in this game. So,
that makes things really interesting, actually.
Because it's like, once you hit 0 position, you're dead. But like, in Dark Souls, normally you respawn at the bonfire, right?
Right.
Right. Well, in the tabletop RPG, you do get to respawn to the bonfire, but you lose all of your soul. And another thing, if half of your party dies, then the entire party fails. So everyone goes back to the bonfire, losing all of their soul and effectively having to start all over again.
That sounds like a really awesome time, actually.
It sounds awesome, but it also sounds like hell in a sense. Like,
yeah, I think that sounds like a lot of fun, actually. I'm not going to lie. That sounds like a good time.
and it's bringing this element of like, I mean, obviously like Dark Souls is a really punishing and like, in a way it can be an unforgiving game, you know, so to take that and reflect it on like that D&D element, like it's interesting to see how they went about this, like especially involving position. Like you're risking one thing in order to do another thing.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties into the game itself as well, because you need to put yourself into, you know, like into a good spot to make, you know, like do the damage you need to do, especially if it's like a big enemy. You know, like I said about like Giant Theory in the beginning, you just gotta get underneath the guy and like stay in the right spot.
Yeah.
So positioning is super crucial. And again, like doing that on a tabletop you can't really simulate that very well. So I think that's actually a really incredible mechanic to like have included.
Yeah, and you know, in Dark Souls, like you can run out of stamina pretty easily if you're just spamming moves, you know, so you have to be able to balance your stamina along with keeping track of like your movements and like when you get to attack, because I think even attacks use up your stamina, right? Like it's not just limited to like rolls and things like that.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I mean, originally in like Dark Souls, like everything, you know, if you're sprinting, if you're attacking, if you're rolling.
So in a way, it is kind of like you're trading health for your attacks, because you know sometimes you might be rolling out of the way and issuing an attack when you really shouldn't have, and then you get hit in response to it. So you know there is a bit of that back and forth, so to speak, within the actual Dark Souls games. And you know, I'm sure there's a lot more to be had within the actual like tabletop game. I don't want to give absolutely everything away for those people who would rather experience it for themselves, but what I'll do is I'll leave a link in the description to a Polygon article where they had various Dark Souls fans and D&D fans all getting together to play the same game. So they talk about their experiences and the more detailed side of movements and abilities you have. How I mentioned there's like things that you can do to like tweak dice rolls. Like it's crazy. It gets really in depth.
Really amazing, actually.
It's really cool. I figured it would be right up your alley because, you know, you were gushing about both of these things for roughly an hour, you know, so pretty easy to take care of in that regard.
Yeah, man. I'm going to have to look into it. Like, honestly, as soon as we get done with it, I'm going to look into that.
For sure, yeah.
I want a copy.
And I think, well, I don't actually know, like, a release date. I don't know if I don't think I came across one like when I was doing my research, but you know, it seems like it's still relatively new, so there might even be more to it than like we may initially be led to believe. But yeah, go ahead and check that out. And again, I'll leave that link in the description for anyone who's interested in the more detailed side of the Dark Souls tabletop RPG experience.
Absolutely, man. I'm gonna make myself an expert on this in no time.
There you go. So on that note, let's move on to the news about Divinity and I guess just Larian Studios in general. So as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, Baldur's Gate 3 has been, well, actually is being developed by Larian Studios. So I guess first things first, I don't know anything about Baldur's Gate. I know that it's currently in early access, and it's receiving patches over time, and I think its latest patch is like patch number 7 as of a week ago. So
yeah, it's been a big undertaking for Larian. I've been following it for a long time. For context, Baldur's Gate is an actual city in the Forgotten Realms, which is where the D&D world is built. It's a major city in there, and the Baldur's Gate game franchise has been around for decades. There's been a couple of...
Yeah, I didn't actually know that it was part of like D&D. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's like a major city in like the Forgotten Realms. It's in the Faerun, which is like it's where it's at. I'm not sure how you say it, probably, but that's how I pronounce it, Faerun. In that region of like the map of Forgotten Realms. And basically, the Baldur's Gate game, this one has been a massive undertaking for Larian. And again, being a big fan of Divinity, I was recommended this game, obviously, because wanting more content from the studio, and I see they're making this game, I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be really great. They did a massive world premiere for it, and they also, one of the big things that breaks it away from Divinity in a way is, I mentioned before how Divinity mimics D&D in a lot of ways in terms of how it's built and how you interact with the world. Well, Baldur's Gate 3 is sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, who make Dungeons and Dragons.
Right, okay.
And all the combat is just straight up D&D 5th edition. Like, your character, when you do something, there's a dice roll. When you do an attack, there's a dice roll. All the different things you would do in D&D are literally playing out in Baldur's Gate. And the game's in a very early stage so far right now, but I think I bought it as soon as the early access released. So I've been playing the most primitive versions that have been out for the public, and frankly, in that limited experience I've been loving it.
Wow.
There are a lot of people saying it's going to be even bigger and better than Divinity Original Sin 2. And considering how I feel about that game, that's a massive claim.
No, that seems like, if you're saying like it's literally copying like what D&D is doing, like with even down to the dice roll, like I think it speaks for itself at that point. Like it's got so much ahead of its and no wonder they're on patch number 7. Like, it just kind of makes you think like how many patches they plan to release before they just officially launch the game. So
yeah, and it's been really awesome that they've been very open with the development of things.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of community feedback goes straight to them. Jokingly, when they were doing their testing at one point, they talked about wanting to... They were testing on, I think, a 3070, a GTX 3070 graphics card.
Okay.
And they were like, hey, can someone send us a 3080? We've never seen one. We can't buy one, and we believe they don't exist. And like a bunch of fans sent them 3080 Ti's.
Oh no.
And they were like, we were kidding. Like, we were just kidding. You guys don't need to do this. But people donated stuff to them, and they've been very open with the development. Patch 7 was big because they added barbarians to the game, which has been a highly clamored for thing since the game released, or at least the early access launched. And they're kind of building it from the ground up with the community's help because they want to make sure it's perfect.
That's amazing.
And I think that is just one of the things I love about the studio. And I'm always going to follow these guys, I think, because they just make such well-connected content. And it's not, it doesn't feel like egregious fan service. It doesn't feel like it's forced. Like, they just make really, really good shit constantly.
And it sounds like they're doing it because they like making games. Like, obviously, they need to make money, but it's, they wouldn't be putting this much polish into this game series if they weren't into it themselves. Like, this is a big deal to them. And especially with Baldur's Gate, like, I'm sure they were more than happy to work on it. And
this is a big deal for the D&D community as well, because, a lot of D&D, it's a really big deal for the D&D community, I think, as a whole, because a lot of times there's not a good way to translate the Dungeons and Dragons dice rolling experience with your friends into a video game properly. So for them to work directly with Wizards of the Coast and have it be an actual sponsored game using actual 5e rules really pushes like the boundaries on like, we can play D&D anywhere now. We can play it any way. Honestly, yeah, that's what it sounds like. You don't need pencil and paper anymore. You just crack open a copy of Baldur's Gate. Yeah, all you need is a 3080 Ti and 32 gigs of RAM. Yeah, just to have that lying around, basically. Oh yeah, no big deal. No more primitive nonsense. We're in the space age now, man. Yeah, we just entered space. I'd honestly rather be able to play D&D from across the world than to go to space. I'll take that trade. It's a good trade. And you know what? With the more funding that Larian Studios get, they might be able to do both eventually. Like, I mean, if you're looking at those Kickstarter numbers, like, it could happen. I can't wait.
But speaking of supporting Larian Studios, if you take a look at their official website, you'll see that they're actually promoting a ton of stuff on their merch website. So, with a huge game like this, you're bound to get like really cool merchandise. So you've got stuff like the entire soundtrack pressed onto some very slick gold and red vinyl records. You've also got the official Godwoken graphic novel, which has over 300 pages of beautifully full-colored illustrated artwork that details the accumulated history and origin stories of the 6 Godwoken of Divinity Original Sin 2. So,
oh yeah,
I think those are pretty cool.
That's awesome. I have to spend all my money on this now.
I didn't know if I was under the impression that you might already own this.
No, not yet. I've been just kind of letting the updates roll out for this game. I haven't been looking too much into like what's on the website, but now I have to know all of this.
Well, maybe you should plug your ears for this next bit, because if you dig deep enough on their website, you'll find a link to their Kickstarter yet again, where this time they're offering pre-orders for the official Divinity Original Sin board game. And for starters, I've come to notice that for a show all about video games like this podcast, the topic of board games seems to come up a lot. Like, not that it's necessarily by choice, but with our recent trend of talking about RPGs on the show, it seems like successful RPG games being turned into board games and tabletop games has become a pretty popular move. And to be fair, it does make for some really great news, so I can't complain.
It's kind of a pretty natural transition. Now, granted, having it turn out good is a whole different ballgame, but
right.
It's interesting to see how that's going to go.
Well, I mean, I hope it turns out good, because considering, if you're going back to the Kickstarter, the funding period has closed, but you can still pre-order it via a late pledge, so to speak. So I will admit it's a pretty steep price of about $120, and with an even more expansive tier reaching all the way up to $220.
Yikes.
Yeah, but, of course, with every price comes a few extra goodies. The base game gives you, of course, your own copy for up to 4 people to play simultaneously, as well as any unlocked stretch goals, which, let's face it, the stretch goals have been more than just successfully achieved.
Of course.
So, if Divinity Original Sin 2, if the actual game made over $2 million, this board game alone, as of this day, has made over $2.8 million worth of funding. So the campaign itself has reached almost 1,500% of its original funding goal. So
that's phenomenal, actually.
It really is. And, that's considering the popularity of Original Sin 2, like the first game moving on to a sequel, like, of course, like, fans are going to be about that, but like now knowing that the fan base is even bigger than it was before, and also because the board game costs like $200, I mean, there's no wonder that they're getting all this money. But regardless, the $120 tier gives you those things. It gives you the game and it gives you the stretch goals, but the second tier at $220 gives you a copy of the game. And in addition, you'll also receive the Boss Upgrade Pack, metal coin set, upgraded leather bags, and an extra set of dice. So in total, for an extra $100, it sounds like you're getting more game and more things to play the game with. So for some people, that's a pretty cool trade-off.
I was thinking initially that I probably shouldn't spend that much money on some game merchandise, but you said dice, and I can never have too much dice, so now I'm going to have to purchase this.
I think, you know what? I feel like I saw it somewhere that like you could get the dice separately, so you might be in luck for that. But that being said, like looking at the actual Kickstarter numbers, more people were actually backing the $220 option instead of the $120 because they need these extra goodies, what with the metal coins and whatnot. So I don't know. It's still cool regardless. And even then, you still got that graphic novel to look forward to.
Yeah, man. I actually really want to read through that, honestly, because it sounds really, really awesome.
It probably is. You're probably not far off from that assumption.
Any excuse to go back through the Divinity universe is a good excuse.
And it gives context for a lot of the characters. So what was the one guy? He's like, he looks like a skeleton.
Oh, that's Fane.
Fane, that's right. Yeah. He they mentioned something like, it's like, have you ever wondered what Fane looked like before he looked like this? You know, like. They detail like the backstories of like all these characters, and it's pretty cool. Even for someone that's like not into the game series, I would probably still read it. Like just cause like it seems like a cool story.
I would love to know. See, now I'm gonna have to buy this. So thank you for in advance for burning my money out of my wallet.
Well, that's the price you pay for being on the show. What can I say?
You know what? Worth it.
But appreciate that. But yeah, I mean that's it for Divinity news. Moving on to sports games and just Madden in general, I guess. I think something to say, in a bit of late news, and we touched on it a little bit earlier. I think it'd be unfair of us to not acknowledge the passing of John Madden himself. He of course passed away back in late December, and many people came to mourn over the loss of a very iconic presence in NFL history. So
yeah,
for context, he lived to be a very fulfilling age of 85, during which time he coached over 10 seasons of the Oakland Raiders, never once having a losing streak. And after which period he provided commentary for NFL games for 30 seasons for various networks. And during that time, he also won 16 Emmys as Outstanding Sports Personality / Sport Event Analyst. And of course, he had his name attached to one of the most iconic series in sports gaming history.
Yeah, the guy is and was a legend in like all aspects.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can make an argument for being the greatest coach of all time. I don't think there's an argument to be made for anybody who's a greater sportscaster than him. I think all of the tropes that common like sportscasters follow nowadays, they're all really trying to follow like the guidelines that he did. Yeah,
they're really just doing a John Madden 2.0.
Yeah, I think because before John Madden became a sportscaster, if you ever watch old NFL films videos, they talk about football, and it's almost like it's a church service. It'll just be like, like Tim Jones runs the ball down the field. He gets 15 yards and gets in for a touchdown.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
That's really all they do. And John Madden brought this incredible life to it. So when someone would score a touchdown late in the game to like change the outlook of the game, like, he'd be really excited if an underdog was winning and they won in dramatic fashion on upset, upset some big, overwhelming favorite, he'd be really excited calling the game. Like, put a lot more emotion into it. And also, as I mentioned before, like, he was a lifelong teacher, and he really wanted to teach people the game of football. And
that's right.
People like me, and I think millions and millions of, like a countless number of people have been, really incredibly impacted by, his contributions on television and his contributions to video gaming, and just really what he's built, like, from a media perspective on, like, how we all view sports as a culture.
Yeah, no, there's no doubting that. Like, he definitely left his mark, that's for sure.
And his documentary is called All Madden. It came out literally only a few days before he actually passed. I watched it. I ended up watching it the day after I found out that John Madden had passed away, and it was such a good documentary. If you ever want to watch a good sports story, watch that. Fair warning, it's a tearjerker, but it's so good though. Like it's such a good story.
Well, I mean, previously, I'd already mentioned that I'm not exactly a sports fan, but that is something that does sound relatively interesting to me. I mean, without him, it's hard to say if the series would have ever gotten as popular as it did, with with such an iconic name and having it date all the way back to the first installment in 1988. I'm sure he played a significant part in making it happen. And,
I think that I don't think football video game would have been the same without him.
Yeah.
They cover...
Or even just football in general, like you were describing.
Oh, absolutely. I think that they cover this in the documentary, that whenever John Madden football was originally being developed, they wanted to do it like even before the original release date. They wanted to have it come out a lot sooner, but the technology would have only allowed for the game to be 7-on-7.
Oh, okay.
And he said, they say, hey, we want to make John Madden football. It's going to be 7-on-7 based on the limitations of video games at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, if it's not going to be 11-on-11, it's not football, and don't put my name on it.
Okay.
So they waited to make John Madden football until they could make it the way that it needed to be made.
Make it happen.
And and from there, just the rest is history. I mean, we talked before about that generational gap, that there's a lot of people that don't really understand how great he was as a coach or as a broadcaster, not just as a personality on the game.
And I mean, you know what? On a bit of a sillier note, if you will, I've had an account on YouTube for well over a decade, watching videos and keeping up with like memes and viral videos. They weren't called memes at the time. It was just funny things. But, when I'm not working on something, I'm usually on YouTube watching pretty much anything, anytime I'm not working on something. So when I heard about John Madden's passing, like after the first initial shock and, disappointment over the whole thing, like later that day, I eventually found myself on YouTube again. And what I had done was I ended up spending like a solid hour in the comments section of a ton of Moonbase Alpha videos. So
yeah.
I must have binged around like 10 different clips that people uploaded of just people playing the game and being silly and cracking jokes and singing with the built-in text-to-speech software. So I know you're aware, Aaron, but for those unaware of where this is going, that there was a common thing to do in the game where you just spam the same words over and over, or like a series of characters and stuff, and when it's repeated, it just made a ton of noise and threw the entire mission off course, because like in the game you do missions, I guess. I never actually played it myself, but it basically creates a ton of noise and no one can get anything done because like no one could talk over each other. So within that sort of, I guess, meme, like just saying the words John Madden over and over warranted enough of an inside joke within the community that like when I went to those comment sections, there was nothing but pages and pages of comments mourning the loss of John Madden. And it's like, like they're just sort of honoring his name within the context of this game. Like it's just crazy to think about, because like, I mean, for one thing, I thought it was hilarious, but it's also like incredibly wholesome considering there were a ton of people just like me who had one of their first subconscious thoughts after hearing the news were to visit these stupid Moonbase Alpha videos just to offer their condolences on John Madden. Like, even though he had nothing to do with the game, it was just weirdly incredible to see. Like,
it's really such a wholesome like meme, and I remember that like so vividly.
Just everyone repeating the same thing over and over. And if you Google Moonbase Alpha or just search it on YouTube, you're gonna see the exact videos that I'm talking about. But if you have no idea what I'm talking about, holy crap, you're in for a treat. Like, I mean, you're in for a treat if you like really stupid humor, but it's just
beautiful.
It's just one of those things, really. And the same thing happened to me regarding Bob Saget, because he passed away recently, and because I'm just forever on YouTube, one of the first things I did was go to a bunch of best of Tourette's guy videos and see a similar reaction. And like, it's not insulting, like it's not in an insulting manner. It's just wild to think that these weird little references of these people within these niche parts of the internet really stuck out to me, even though to like millions of other people, their influences mean something completely different. Like obviously John Madden's a legendary sportscaster and everything else like that. But in my mind, I just think of the little astronaut just saying John Madden over and over. So like, it's just interesting and pretty funny in retrospect. Nonetheless, you know, if it's not obvious, I honor and respect John Madden and Bob Saget's names. Like none of this is being said maliciously. I just thought it was something funny and lighthearted to share, just because you know, there's bound to be someone out there that relates to me in that aspect. And you know, like I had a really good time doing it. Like it's just so wholesome seeing like people like celebrating his name in the comment section of what you would least expect it to be overall.
Right. It just shows that like in a whole different way, just the incredible reach that something like that can have, you know?
Yeah, seriously. Just because someone saw, I don't know, like someone played Madden or maybe just knew John Madden's name and they decided to make it into a meme, like the influence knows no bounds. Let me tell you.
It just sounded funny and they're like, let's just go with it.
Exactly. But you know, on the topic of sports games that I personally follow, the next bit of news that I have is Skate 4 rumors are starting to ramp up in popularity again with
Skate
the
4,
alleged
baby.
Yeah, the alleged announcement supposedly is getting closer and closer. So, according to an article from tweaktown.com, EA's very own CEO Andrew Wilson goes on to confirm that user-created content will be, quote, at the very center at the design of Skate, which will be launching soon. So, you know, this is a transcription of the Q3 2022 earnings call, and it took place sometime between late January and early February, supposedly to discuss the upcoming sales of the later half of the year. You know, the last bit of news to come out for Skate 4, or whatever it's going to be called, that was back in August of last year, where they announced the series was coming to PC for the first time, which is pretty cool.
That's absolutely massive, yeah.
Yeah, even before that, like way before that, was the game's official announcement, all the way back almost 2 whole years ago at the EA Play event in June of 2020. So, I mean, even to me right now, like, it's still kind of weird to say that 2020 was over 2 years ago. It still feels kind of strange, but you know, it's unclear when the game's release date will actually be announced, but rumors have led us to believe that it will be sometime in 2022, probably around this year's EA Play in June, to follow the previous like announcement cycle. And overall, this is going to be the first game in the Skate series in over a decade, since Skate 3 was released back in 2010, and I find that incredibly hard to believe.
So old,
right? Like, I mean, I know it was on Xbox 360, but like, come on, like, really was that long ago? And I found that hard to believe.
That made me sick.
A little nauseous.
I can't wait though. And when it comes out, I'm gonna just hunker down and call off work and play that all the time.
Yeah, I'm ready for a new fix of Skate. I mean, there's plenty of those. There's plenty of those other games that are being released, at least in the time that it's been taken for Skate 4 to become a thing. Like, there's like games like Skater XL and Session, and I mean, you know, we've had our experiences with those games, and they are cool. Like, they're realistic, but I don't know, they just don't capture the same kind of magic that Skate really does. Like,
yeah, they get the essence, but it's just not the whole thing's just not the same.
Yeah, like, it's, I mean, don't get me wrong, like, if what you're looking for is a realistic skateboarding experience, like, then Session and Skater XL, like by far, like, they definitely know what they're doing. But when it comes to a realistic skateboarding simulation that is also fun and like fluid, then Skate is just like really like done like exceptionally well. Like, I mean, like, Tony Hawk is the game that, like, the game series that everyone goes to think about. But when you're talking realism, you know, you like you're jumping on a piece of wood and sparks come out in Tony Hawk. Like that's not exactly realism. But when you're talking Skate, like, it plays in a way that makes sense, but it's still easy to grasp. Like, Session, I played it for like an hour, and I did maybe like 2 tricks the entire time. So it's like that's not to say the game is bad, but I'm excited for Skate to come out, because then hopefully I will finally be able to kind of like relive that same feeling that Skate gave me in the past.
Yeah, man. I think that the big thing for me is I remember how much time I spent playing Skate as a kid. And even still, I mean, hell, I have it on PS3 just to mess around with.
Yeah.
Just for that exact reason, because I just love those games. And I really cannot wait to see what that team's going to do with, all the stuff that, we've seen games like Skater XL and Session, like you've mentioned. Games try to fill that gap for us and see what they do to really hit that next level, because they have all of our attention.
No, of course. And I mean, like, it's kind of strange, because like going back to like how we kind of found it hard to believe like Skate 3 was so long ago, like it still has staying power nowadays with like, like YouTubers playing it online, like just like posting like whatever clips of like just them doing like, ragdolling and like Hall of Meat and stuff, like.
Oh, yeah.
You're just like slapping your body around like some stairs or whatever. Like, I'm sure like half of them couldn't care less about the actual skateboarding aspect, but anything can be made funny, like if it's picked up by a Let's Player. So anything that can be made funny will probably be picked up by one in the future. So let's face it. I mean, like I'm glad it's still relevant though. Like, and I'm glad it's finally getting the attention it deserves.
It's something that I think all of us are excited for, because it's been so, like you said, it's been so damn long.
yeah.
I just want Skate 4
it's an understatement, definitely.
Like, no more ports, no reskins, just give me brand new.
No more Tony Hawk 5. Get that shit out of here. I don't want it.
Put that back where it belongs, back on the shelf.
Yeah.
Re-release Tony Hawk 3 and 4, the ones we really want.
I mean,
I'll
even take Project 8 at this point. I mean, I had fun with that one. That was like one of the first games I played online too. Like, I'm not really an online gamer, but like I definitely played Project 8 online, because I just got so good at it and people loved it.
I love Project 8. I think it's really good.
Yeah. Some people like, they're like whatever, but like the nail the trick mode, like where you click the sticks in, like that was insane.
Was so cool.
It was so cool.
That was like one of the coolest parts of that and Proving Ground.
Yeah. But going back to like Skate, I mean, of course there's nervousness. Of course there's like nervousness to be had about EA's reputation, like amongst their games. In the previous episode with Drake, we talk about Dead Space. Check that out if you haven't already. We talked a lot about our suspicions with EA and their habit of microtransactions, and I mean, at least for Dead Space, they confirmed that it won't have it. But as far as I'm aware, Skate is definitely in the running for a game that'll be slathered with like paywalls. And I mean, like I really, really, really hope that's not the case.
I'm hoping it isn't, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
Yeah, and it's like I hate to say it, because like I just hope it's not, because Skate 3 was amazing because of how huge of a game it felt.
Yeah, it really. The scope of those games is just outstanding.
Yeah, and there was always something to do within the base game. Like, you didn't need anything extra. You could have fun just goofing around like within the map. Like, I mean, if they even if they do include like microtransactions, like what? Unless they're hiding like some like core game mechanic behind it. Like, again, I really hope that's not the case. But like, it could go horribly wrong. But I hope I'm proven wrong. Or realistically, I don't know.
Me too, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, other than that, I think that's all the news that I had planned for you. Are there any other upcoming games that you're particularly interested in? Like, is there anything else you might want to bring up?
Elden Ring it consumed most of my gaming consciousness.
Sure.
So outside of that and the new Skate game and Baldur's Gate 3, those 3 things are kind of like the most I'm excited for than anything, honestly.
That's fair. I mean, at least for, because I'm a recent Hollow Knight fan, I've been paying attention to the subreddits, and there's a lot of discussion about Silksong, which is supposedly the sequel. But, considering that Team Cherry, the guys who made it, I think it's only quite literally like 4 or 5 people on that team. So, like, it's like people are impatient to say the least, but like, I don't know. Either way, I think that is going to be all the time that we have for today. I'm ready to hop off, get some extra work done, and, you know, hopefully get this podcast out in a reasonable manner. So, you know, Aaron, I'm going to hand the mic over to you. Now's your chance to plug any last-minute promos for yourself, like any social medias or channels, or, you know, you can just give a proper send-off to the audience, whatever you want, man.
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me on here. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. I mentioned to you before, ever since like you started doing it, I was like really excited. I was like, oh, I can't wait to like talk about this stuff. 'Cause I love talking about video games with my friends and stuff like that. So it's been a really good time for me. As for what I'm working on outside of this, as I mentioned before, I am on Twitch at Legend Penguin 23. I'm going to be streaming more consistently this year, upcoming. I still have to finish LA Noir, so that's coming up soon on stream. Music stuff, 14 Yellow, Loopzilla, and Liz Scott. Those are my 3 projects. We're doing some work on playing live shows. 14 Yellow's been playing live shows for a long time. Liz Scott's getting into it as well. So be on the lookout for all that. All those are on Spotify. And yeah, give it a listen and check it out and come hang out with me on stream sometime. Perfect.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself, honestly. And again, I appreciate you joining me on this episode here, Aaron. It means a lot to me knowing that you're a big fan of the show, and I hope that one of you guys out there might be a big fan as well. So if you enjoyed the show and you have any questions you'd like us to answer, or, you know, have some recommendations for the next episode, feel free to leave a comment down below if you're on YouTube, or you can message me on Instagram or Twitter at Jump Higher Productions. That's Jump Higher PROD. We'll be back next time when we find someone that we can dive deep into the discussion with, and hopefully we can continue to share our personal connections to video games with you all. So, thank you so much for listening. Again, thank you, Aaron, for joining us here. And with all that being said, I'm going to leave it at that. So, thanks for listening, and bye for now. I'll see you around. Oh boy.